He abandoned her in her darkest moments, when the disease was consuming her and she needed him the most. But fate, as always, has its surprises. Years later, as the will was read, the husband who thought himself untouchable felt a cold shiver run down his spine, something he could never have imagined, and that would change his life forever. The autumn breeze carried the scent of lemon blossoms through the open French doors of the imposing Mediterranean-style mansion perched high in the Bel Air hills. Claire Carter's delicate fingers trembled as she gripped the medical folder, its crisp manila edges digging into her palms. She stared at the Los Angeles skyline stretching out beyond her terrace, the downtown skyscrapers shimmering like distant sentinels in the afternoon light. The doctor's words still echoed in her head, clinical and precise, severing her life into before and after. Stage 3, aggressive, treatment options, survival rates. She inhaled deeply, savoring the fragrant air that suddenly felt like a luxury. At 42, Claire Carter had constructed a life that many envied. Senior partner at Westwood, Blackwell & Associates, one of LA's most prestigious law firms. Married to Christopher Carter, the dashing CEO of Carter Property Development. Their sprawling Bel Air estate featured in Architectural Digest just last spring. Their Christmas card photo from St. Bart's had been the envy of their social circle. Perfect life, perfect couple. The irony wasn't lost on her. As a litigator, she had built her reputation on finding hidden truths, exposing weaknesses in seemingly airtight cases. Yet she had missed the growing malignancy in her own body. The distinctive purr of Christopher's Aston Martin echoed up the curved driveway. Claire quickly wiped away the tear tracks on her cheeks, sliding the medical folder under a stack of briefs on the antique writing desk. She smoothed her silk blouse and ran a hand through her chestnut hair, cut in the elegant bob that had become her signature look in the courtroom. "Claire?" Christopher's voice resonated through the marble foyer, followed by the familiar sound of his Italian leather briefcase landing on the entryway console. "You home early?" She cleared her throat, willing strength into her voice. On the terrace. Christopher Carter strode through the living room with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. At 45, he remained as striking as when they'd met at Stanford Law, tall and athletic with salt and pepper hair that only enhanced his appeal. His tailored Tom Ford suit hung perfectly on his frame, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light as he stepped onto the terrace. "This is a surprise," he said, leaning to kiss her cheek. "What happened to the Thompson deposition?" "Rescheduled." Claire forced a smile, noticing how Christopher's eyes didn't quite meet hers, that slight distance that had been growing between them over the past year. "I thought we could have dinner together. It's been weeks." Christopher checked his watch, frowning slightly. "I've got that meeting with the Shanghai investors at 7. Rain check?" He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25. "Chris, we need to talk." Claire's voice broke slightly on the last word. Something in her tone made him pause, glass suspended halfway to his lips. He finally looked at her, really looked, and his expression shifted from distraction to concern. "What's wrong? Did something happen with the Riverton case?" Claire shook her head, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Always about work." "No, nothing like that. The words caught in her throat. Christopher set his glass down, moving closer. "Claire, I went to see Dr. Feldman today." She struggled to keep her voice steady. "The results from my biopsy came back." His expression morphed from concern to confusion, then dawning realization. "Biopsy? When did you?" "Last week, while you were in Seattle." She hadn't told him about the suspicious mammogram, the follow-up ultrasound, the core needle biopsy. He'd been so wrapped up in the Seattle development deal, and they'd been like ships passing in the night for months. "I didn't want to worry you until I knew something definitive." Christopher paled slightly, lowering himself onto the teak lounge chair opposite her. "And now you do?" Claire nodded, her attorney's composure crumbling. "It's cancer, Chris. Invasive ductal carcinoma. Stage 3. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity, broken only by the distant sound of traffic on Sunset Boulevard and the gentle splash of the infinity pool's waterfall feature. "Jesus, Claire." Christopher ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. "Stage 3, that's serious." "Yes." She watched him carefully, searching for the right words. "Dr. Feldman wants to start aggressive treatment immediately. Surgery, then chemo, possibly radiation." Christopher stood abruptly, pacing the travertine tiles. "But you'll be okay, right? With treatment? People beat cancer all the time now." His question hung in the air between them. Claire had always prided herself on preparedness, on knowing the facts and probabilities of any situation. Now she found herself adrift in uncertainty. "The 5-year survival rate is about 72% with my specific diagnosis." Her voice took on the detached tone she used when presenting difficult facts to clients. "Better than a coin flip, not as good as I'd like." Christopher's face contorted, emotions flashing across it too quickly to decipher. "You always did love your statistics," he said, reaching for his scotch and draining it in one swallow. "When do they want to start?" "Next week. I'll need to take a leave of absence from the firm." The words felt strange in her mouth. In 20 years of practicing law, she had never taken more than a 2-week vacation. "Of course," Christopher nodded, his gaze drifting toward the skyline. "We should get a second opinion. Shall call Richard. His brother-in-law is chief of oncology at Cedars-Sinai." Claire watched her husband shift into problem-solving mode, his initial shock giving way to action items. It was how he handled everything: identify the problem, develop a strategy, execute. She had always admired this about him, his ability to face challenges head-on. Now she wondered if it was also his way of maintaining emotional distance. "Chris," she said softly, "I'm scared." For a moment, vulnerability flashed across his face, a crack in the confident facade. He crossed to her chair and knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "Listen to me," he said, his blue eyes intense. "We're going to fight this thing with everything we've got. The best doctors, the most advanced treatments, whatever it takes." Claire squeezed his hand, drawing comfort from his conviction, even as a small voice inside her wondered if the "we" in his statement truly included him, or if she'd be fighting this battle largely alone. "I need you with me," she whispered. "Really with me." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, kissing her forehead. 3 weeks later, Claire sat in the sunlit kitchen, nursing a mug of ginger tea. The surgery had gone well, according to Dr. Feldman. Clean margins, no evidence the cancer had spread to her lymph nodes beyond what they'd already identified. Small victories. Her body felt foreign to her now, bandaged and tender, exhaustion seeping into her bones. The house phone rang, its shrill tone piercing the quiet morning. Claire winced, setting down her tea to answer it. "Carter residence." "Claire, it's Michael." The familiar voice of Christopher's best friend and business partner brought a genuine smile to her face. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've gone 10 rounds with Muhammad Ali," she replied, easing herself onto a kitchen stool. "But the doctors are pleased, so I'm trying to be too." "That's my girl," Michael chuckled. "Always the fighter. Listen, is Chris there? He's not answering his cell, and we've got the West Side developers breathing down our necks about the environmental impact report." Claire frowned. "He left for the office over an hour ago. Said he had an early meeting." A pause on the line. "That's strange. There's nothing on his calendar until noon." An uncomfortable feeling settled in Claire's stomach. "Maybe he stopped to pick up those contract revisions from Jessica," she suggested, even as her mind flickered through other possibilities. "Maybe?" Michael's tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "When you talk to him, tell him to call me ASAP, okay? And Claire, take care of yourself. Anything you need, anything at all, Diane and I are here." "Thanks, Michael." "That means a lot." After hanging up, Claire sat motionless, staring at the phone. Inconsistencies in Christopher's schedule weren't new, but they had been increasing in frequency over the past few months. Late nights at the office, weekend emergencies with development projects, sudden business trips. She had attributed it to the expansion of Carter property development into the Asian market, the stress of managing a growing company. Now, with the clarity that sometimes comes with facing mortality, other possibilities began to surface in her mind. The text messages he shielded from her view, the unexplained charges at boutique hotels on his corporate card, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume that occasionally clung to his clothes. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Claire made her way slowly to the entrance, tightening the belt of her silk robe around her waist. Through the frosted glass panels, she could make out a delivery person holding a massive arrangement of white calla lilies, her favorite. "Mrs. Carter?" the young man asked, balancing the elaborate crystal vase. "Yes, thank you." She signed for the delivery, tipping the man generously before bringing the flowers inside. The card nestled among the blooms was handwritten in Christopher's distinctive script, "To my warrior, all my love, C." Claire traced her finger over the words. emotion welling in her throat. This was the Christopher she had fallen in love with. Thoughtful, romantic, the man who had once written her love letters during their law school courtship. Her cell phone vibrated on the counter. A text from Christopher. Did they arrive? Hope they brighten your day. Swamped with meetings. Will try to be home early. Order whatever you want for dinner. Love you. Claire replied with a simple, thank you, they're beautiful, and a heart emoji, setting the phone down with a sigh. The flowers were a lovely gesture, but they couldn't fill the growing void of his physical absence when she needed him most. The first round of chemotherapy hit Claire like a freight train. Despite the anti-nausea medications, she spent hours hunched over the toilet in their master bathroom, her body rejecting everything. Christopher had attended the first infusion with her, holding her hand and chatting nervously with the nurses, but had begged off subsequent appointments, citing unavoidable meetings. It was Michael who stepped in, quietly arranging his schedule to drive Claire to treatments, sitting beside her with a book or his laptop, while the drugs dripped into her veins. It was Michael who stocked their refrigerator with ginger ale and popsicles, who researched which foods might be gentle enough for her ravaged digestive system. You don't have to do this, Claire told him one afternoon as he helped her from the car after a particularly brutal session. Michael's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. I know I don't have to. I want to. He steadied her as a wave of dizziness passed. Besides, what are friends for if not the hard times? Friends. The word seemed inadequate for what Michael had become. A lifeline, a constant in the shifting landscape of her illness. At 50, Michael Dawson had the solid dependability of someone comfortable in his own skin. Divorced 5 years earlier when his wife left him for a younger man, he had thrown himself into work and charity, becoming a fixture at children's hospital fundraisers and habitat restoration projects along the LA River. Christopher often teased him for his bleeding heart liberal tendencies, a stark contrast to his own ruthless business approach. Yet the friendship between the men had endured since their days as roommates at Stanford, their differences somehow complementary rather than divisive, until now. Claire couldn't help noticing the growing tension between them, the clipped phone conversations, Michael's careful avoidance of mentioning Christopher when they were together. That evening, Claire sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. Her once lustrous hair had begun falling out in clumps, and her complexion had taken on a greyish tinge. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, making them appear larger, more vulnerable in her thinning face. The bedroom door opened and Christopher entered, loosening his tie. He paused when he saw her, a flash of something, discomfort, pity, crossing his features before he masked it with a smile. "Hey there," he said, crossing to kiss the top of her head. "How was today's treatment?" "About the same," Claire replied, watching him in the mirror as he moved to the walk-in closet, shedding his suit jacket. "Michael brought me home around 3. Christopher's movement stilled momentarily. "Michael again? Doesn't he have a company to run?" "He's been incredibly supportive," Claire said, turning to face him directly. "Unlike some people." The words hung between them, sharper than she'd intended. Christopher emerged from the closet, his expression hardening. "That's not fair, Claire. I'm trying to keep our business afloat while dealing with all of this. Someone has to." "All of this," she repeated, the phrase landing like a stone. "You mean my cancer? The thing that's trying to kill me?" Christopher ran a hand through his hair, exasperation evident. "You know that's not what I meant." "But yes, your illness has affected everything. Our schedules, our finances, our future plans. I'm doing my best to manage it all." "Manage it," Claire's voice rose. "This isn't a problem to be managed, Chris. This is our life, my life, falling apart. And I need my husband, not just his credit card for the medical bills." "What do you want from me?" Christopher's controlled facade cracked, revealing the frustration beneath. "I can't sit around this mausoleum watching you suffer. I can't fix this for you. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel so goddamn helpless?" Claire stared at him, seeing for the first time the toll the situation had taken on him as well, the new lines around his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders. Yet something in his outburst rang hollow, like an actor reciting lines he didn't fully believe. "Yes," she said quietly. "I know exactly what it's like to feel helpless. I live with it every single day now." Christopher's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He sat heavily on the edge of their king-sized bed, head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I'm not handling this well. I know that." Claire moved to sit beside him, the effort leaving her breathless. "Neither am I," she admitted. "But we promised for better or worse, remember? This is definitely the worse part." He nodded, taking her hand and pressing it between both of his. "I remember." A pause, then, "I have to go to Miami next week. The Brickell Avenue project is in trouble, permits, contractors, the usual nightmare. I'll be gone 4, maybe 5 days. Claire withdrew her hand slowly. "Another trip? Now?" "It can't be helped. Without the Miami development, we're overextended on the Shanghai deal. It could bring down everything we've built. And if I need you? If something happens with my treatment?" Christopher met her gaze, his blue eyes serious. "Michael will be here, right? He seems to have appointed himself your guardian angel." A trace of bitterness colored his words. "That's not fair," Claire said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "Life isn't fair," Christopher replied, standing abruptly. "Your cancer taught us that, didn't it?" He headed toward the bathroom. "I'm going to shower." The door closed behind him with a definitive click, leaving Claire alone with the growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them, perhaps irreparably. 3 days later, Claire sat in Dr. Feldman's office, the antiseptic smell burning her nostrils. The oncologist's expression was grave as she reviewed Claire's latest blood work. "Your white cell count is dangerously low," Dr. Feldman explained, her gentle voice at odds with the severity of her words. "We need to delay your next chemotherapy session until these numbers improve. Otherwise, you'll be at high risk for infection." Claire nodded, processing the information. Another setback, another deviation from the carefully planned treatment schedule. "What can I do?" "Rest. Good nutrition, though I know that's challenging with the nausea, and absolutely minimize your exposure to anyone who might be ill." Dr. Feldman removed her glasses, her expression softening. "Claire, I need to ask, how are things at home? Do you have adequate support?" The question caught Claire off guard. Yes, I think so. My husband is busy with work, but I have friends helping out." Dr. Feldman nodded, though her eyes remained concerned. Cancer doesn't just affect the patient. The emotional toll on spouses can be enormous. Some partners cope by diving into work or other distractions. Others become overly protective. There's no right way to handle it, but communication is essential. Claire thought of Christopher already in Miami, his brief morning texts the only sign of his existence. What if communication isn't possible? What if they're just not there? The doctor's expression grew thoughtful. "Then you surround yourself with people who are there, who can provide the support you need. And maybe, when you're stronger, you have some difficult conversations about what you both want moving forward." The words settled over Claire like a premonition, a glimpse of choices yet to be made. That evening, as Claire dozed fitfully on the living room sofa, the doorbell startled her awake. Wrapping herself in a cashmere throw, she made her way to the entrance, expecting perhaps another flower delivery or one of the meal services Michael had arranged. Instead, she found Christopher's assistant, Jessica, standing nervously on the doorstep, a manila envelope clutched in her manicured hands. "Jessica?" Claire blinked in surprise. "Is everything okay?" The young woman shifted uncomfortably, avoiding direct eye contact. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry to disturb you at home. Mr. Carter asked me to drop off these contracts for you to review. He said they needed your signature before the bank closing tomorrow." Claire frowned, taking the envelope. "Christopher knows I'm on medical leave. My partner at the firm is handling all our legal work now." Jessica's discomfort visibly increased. "He was insistent that you personally review these documents. Something about your specialized knowledge of property easements." The excuse was flimsy at best. Claire had indeed specialized in real estate law earlier in her career, but any competent attorney at her firm could handle standard easement language. "I see. Well, thank you for bringing them over." Claire was about to close the door when she noticed Jessica's hesitation. "Was there something else?" Jessica glanced toward her car, then back at Claire, internal conflict evident on her face. "Mrs. Carter, Claire, She stopped, took a deep breath. "I think you should know that Mr. Carter isn't in Miami alone." The world seemed to tilt slightly, the entryway floor shifting beneath Claire's feet. She gripped the doorframe for support. "What do you mean?" "Amber Walsh is with him." Jessica's voice dropped to just above a whisper. "The lifestyle influencer from his Malibu Beach development marketing campaign. They've been seeing each other for about 6 months now." 6 months. Claire did the mental calculation before her diagnosis. While everything was still perfect, still normal. Why are you telling me this? Claire's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Jessica straightened her shoulders, seemingly finding resolve. Because it's wrong. What he's doing. To you. To the company. I've worked for Mr. Carter for 7 years, and I've looked the other way plenty of times, but not with this. Not with you going through... She gestured vaguely toward Claire's headscarf, her thin frame. It's wrong, and I can't be part of it anymore. I gave my notice this morning. Claire stood frozen, the manila envelope heavy in her hands. Thank you for your honesty, she finally managed, her attorney's composure reasserting itself through the shock. And Jessica? Don't worry about the resignation. You'll have excellent references. After Jessica left, Claire moved through the house like a ghost, the envelope forgotten on the entryway console. In the kitchen, she opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet that Christopher had been saving for a special occasion, pouring herself a generous glass despite the warnings about alcohol during chemotherapy. The wine tasted metallic on her compromised palate, but she drank it anyway, savoring the burn as it went down. She carried her glass to Christopher's home office, a space she rarely entered, his private domain in their shared home. The room was immaculate, like a spread from a business magazine. Sleek, modern desk, ergonomic chair, awards and credentials displayed tastefully on the walls. Claire sat at his desk, running her fingers along the polished surface. On impulse, she opened the center drawer. Pens, paper clips, business cards, nothing revealing. The side drawers contained files, a stapler, extra charges for his devices. Normal, mundane objects that revealed nothing about the man who used them. Claire was about to close the last drawer when her fingers brushed against something taped to its underside. She peeled it away. A small key, the type used for a safe deposit box. Curious now, she continued her search, moving to the custom built-in cabinets that lined one wall of the office. Behind a row of legal reference books that Christopher never read, for show like so much else in their life together, she found a small wall safe she'd never known existed. The key fit perfectly. Inside the safe, Claire found several items: an unmarked USB drive, a small leather notebook, and a velvet jewelry box containing a diamond bracelet she'd never seen before. The receipt tucked inside was from Van Cleef & Arpels on Rodeo Drive, dated 1 month earlier. The price made her eyes widen. $22,500. Claire had received many expensive gifts from Christopher over the years of their marriage, but nothing during her illness. Not even on her birthday 3 weeks earlier, which he'd forgotten entirely until Michael reminded him. With trembling hands, she opened the leather notebook. Inside, in Christopher's precise handwriting, were notes on offshore accounts, investments under names she didn't recognize, and what appeared to be plans for a residential property in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, a project Carter Property Development had no official involvement with. The USB drive contained photos, Christopher and a stunning young woman with honey blonde hair and the sculpted body of someone who made fitness part of her personal brand, Amber Walsh. In some photos they were at restaurants, at the beach, at what appeared to be private villas in tropical locations. In others, they were in states of undress that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The timestamps on the photos confirmed Jessica's timeline. The affair had begun well before Claire's diagnosis. It wasn't a reaction to her illness, it was already in progress when cancer arrived to complicate the picture. Claire sat motionless in Christopher's chair. The evidence of his betrayal spread before her. The pain was physical, a knife twist in her chest that had nothing to do with her surgical scars. She had given this man 20 years of her life, supported his ambitions, celebrated his successes, stood by him through the early failures of his business. She had wanted children, but Christopher had always insisted the time wasn't right. His company needed to be established first, then expanded, then taken international. There was always a reason to wait until it was too late. And now, when she needed him most, he had already moved on to someone younger, healthier, unburdened by disease and mortality. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. "How are you feeling today? Had good meetings. Closing the deal tomorrow, home by Friday. Need anything?" The casual normalcy of it, the utter dishonesty, ignited something in Claire that transcended her physical weakness. Rage, hot and clarifying, surged through her veins. She had spent weeks feeling diminished, watching her body betray her, while simultaneously losing her husband's attention and affection. But Claire Carter had not become one of Los Angeles's most feared litigators by accepting defeat. In the courtroom, she was known for turning seemingly hopeless cases around through meticulous preparation and an uncanny ability to identify her opponent's vulnerabilities. She carefully replaced everything in the safe except the USB drive, which she slipped into her robe pocket. Then she replied to Christopher's text, "Feeling stronger today. Take your time with the deal. Everything's under control here." As she made her way back to the living room, Claire's mind was already formulating a strategy. Christopher had taught her an invaluable lesson. People are rarely who they appear to be, and even the most sacred vows can be shattered for the right price. Now it was time for her to teach him something in return. Betrayal was a game two could play, but only one would win, and Claire Carter had never been a gracious loser. The Santa Ana winds swept across the Los Angeles basin, hot and restless, carrying the scent of distant wildfires. Claire stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her home office, watching the palm trees bend and sway along the winding streets of Bel Air. She had always loved these windows, the way they framed the city like a living painting. Los Angeles spread out beneath her like a kingdom she had helped build. Now she saw it differently. The city had become a chessboard, and she was finally ready to make her opening move. "Mrs. Carter, your guests are here." Maggie, the housekeeper Christopher had insisted they hire when they moved into the Bel Air mansion, appeared at the doorway. "Thank you, Maggie. Please show them in." Claire straightened her silk blouse, adjusting the Hermes scarf she'd draped artfully around her neck to hide her protruding collarbones. She'd lost nearly 20 pounds since beginning chemotherapy, her once athletic frame now alarmingly thin. Yet she'd applied makeup carefully today, determined to project strength despite her weakness. "Claire," Michael's familiar voice preceded him into the room. He crossed to her immediately, embracing her with the gentle care that had become his habit. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. Rage, she had discovered, was an excellent antidote to fatigue. Behind Michael stood Eleanor Blackwell, Claire's law partner and mentor, an imposing woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and the sharp gaze of someone who had spent decades dissecting witnesses on the stand. "You look like hell," Eleanor said without preamble, setting her Bottega Veneta briefcase on Claire's desk. "But I've seen worse. At least you're vertical." Claire laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. "I've missed your brutal honesty, Ellie." The older woman's expression softened momentarily. "The firm isn't the same without you terrorizing the associates." She glanced around the office. "Are we secure here?" Claire nodded. "Christopher won't be back until Friday. Maggie leaves at 6 and I've had the house swept for devices." At Michael and Eleanor's surprised expressions, she added, "Paranoid? Perhaps. But given what I've discovered, not without cause." She gestured for them to sit, then retrieved a folder from her desk drawer. "Thank you both for coming. What I'm about to share requires absolute discretion." "Of course," Michael said, his warm brown eyes concerned. "Claire, what's going on? Your message sounded urgent." Claire took a deep breath, marshalling her thoughts. "I've recently discovered that Christopher has been engaging in activities that violate both our marriage vows and possibly several securities laws." She slid the folder toward Eleanor. "These are copies of documents I found in a hidden safe in his office. I believe he's been moving company assets offshore, possibly in preparation for some kind of financial maneuver." Eleanor opened the folder, her expression growing more severe as she examined the contents. Shell companies in the Caymans, property development in Mexico outside the corporate structure. She looked up sharply. "Claire, if these transactions aren't being reported to the board or shareholders, it's fraud," Claire finished for her. "I know." Michael leaned forward, his face ashen. "That's impossible. I'm CFO. I sign off on all major transactions. These would have crossed my desk." "Unless you were deliberately kept out of the loop," Claire said gently. "Chris has always been good at compartmentalizing, creating silos of information so no one person sees the complete picture." She hesitated, then withdrew the USB drive from her pocket. "There's more. Christopher is having an affair with Amber Walsh." Michael's expression cycled through disbelief, denial, and finally a grim acceptance. "The influencer from the Malibu campaign? Christ, she's barely 30. 29, Claire confirmed, sliding her laptop toward them with the drive inserted. "As you can see, it's been going on for at least 6 months, well before my diagnosis." Eleanor and Michael scrolled through the photos in silence, exchanging glances that Claire couldn't quite interpret. "I'll kill him," Michael finally said, his voice low and dangerous. The business issues aside, to do this to you now, of all times. No, Claire interrupted firmly. What you're going to do is help me. Both of you. Eleanor closed the laptop, her analytical mind clearly already working through possibilities. What exactly did you have in mind? I want to destroy him, Claire said simply. Not with a messy public divorce that would drain my limited energy and potentially impact the company's stability. Something more elegant. She rose and moved to the window again, drawing strength from the panoramic view. Christopher values three things above all else: his reputation, his wealth, and his freedom. I intend to strategically dismantle all three. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Claire, you know I'd do anything for you, but Carter Property Development employs over 200 people. If the company goes down because of Christopher's actions, I have no intention of harming innocent employees, Claire assured him, or legitimate investors. My target is Christopher, not the company. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Smart. What's your plan? Claire turned back to face them, her expression resolute. First, I need information. Everything about Amber Walsh, the offshore accounts, and this mysterious Cabo property. Second, I need to secure my financial position without alerting Christopher. And third, she paused, a cold smile forming on her lips. I need to create an insurance policy, something that ensures my interests are protected regardless of what happens with my health. Eleanor tapped her manicured nails on the desk. I can handle the financial aspects. California is a community property state, and given the circumstances, we could petition for more than half if necessary. As for the offshore movements, those might give us leverage for a favorable settlement. I don't want a settlement, Claire clarified. I want justice. Michael stood and paced the room, his mind clearly racing. I can look into the company books, trace the money flows. If he's been hiding transactions, there will be discrepancies. As for Amber Walsh, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I know someone at William Morris who handles influencer contracts. They might have background information. Claire felt a surge of gratitude for these two people who, unlike her husband, had not abandoned her when illness made her inconvenient. Thank you both, but there's one more thing I haven't mentioned. She took a steadying breath. Dr. Feldman isn't optimistic about my long-term prognosis. The cancer is aggressive and it's not responding to treatment as well as they'd hoped. The room fell silent. Eleanor's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the friend beneath the attorney's exterior. How bad? Bad enough that I need to consider the possibility that I won't be here to see this through, Claire admitted. Which means I need something that continues working on my behalf, even if I can't. Michael crossed to her, taking her hands in his. Don't talk like that. You're going to beat this. Claire squeezed his hands, appreciating his optimism even as she rejected it. I hope so, but hope isn't a strategy, and I'm done leaving things to chance. She gently withdrew from his grasp. I want to create a trust with very specific conditions, a posthumous insurance policy, if you will. Eleanor's professional mask slipped back into place. I assume you have something specific in mind? I do. Claire smiled, and for the first time in months she felt something like her old self, the formidable attorney who had built a reputation on turning opponents' strengths into fatal weaknesses. Christopher isn't the only one who can plan for contingencies. 2 days later, Claire sat in the minimalist waiting area of Westwood Cancer Center, flipping absently through a glossy magazine. The private treatment facility catered to wealthy Angelenos who preferred their healthcare delivered with the same exclusivity as their dining experiences. Mrs. Carter? A nurse in tailored scrubs appeared at the doorway. Dr. Feldman is ready for you. Claire followed her through the hushed corridors, past treatment rooms where other patients sat receiving infusions behind privacy glass. The oncology center resembled a high-end spa more than a medical facility, with its muted lighting and original artwork adorning the walls. Christopher had insisted on this place, only the best for my wife, though he had visited exactly once. Dr. Feldman rose from behind her desk as Claire entered, greeting her with the warm but professional manner that had made her one of the most sought-after oncologists in Los Angeles. Claire, good to see you. How are you feeling this week? Better than expected, Claire replied, settling into the ergonomic chair across from the doctor. The nausea is more manageable with the new medication. Dr. Feldman nodded, glancing at the tablet in her hands. Your blood counts have improved slightly, which is encouraging. I think we can proceed with the next round of treatment on Monday. They discussed the upcoming chemotherapy session, potential side effects, and adjustments to her medication regimen. Claire listened attentively, asking precise questions about each recommendation, approaching her treatment with the same meticulous attention she'd once given to complex litigation. "Before I go," Claire said, as their consultation wound down, "I wanted to ask about clinical trials. Are there any new approaches I should be considering?" Dr. Feldman's expression turned thoughtful. "Actually, yes. There's a promising immunotherapy trial at UCLA that might be appropriate for your case. The preliminary results have been quite impressive for patients with your specific genetic markers." "What would that involve?" "It's intensive. Weekly treatments for 3 months, comprehensive monitoring, possible hospitalization if side effects become severe. But it offers hope for patients who haven't responded optimally to standard protocols." Claire absorbed this information, weighing it against her other plans. "And the success rate?" "In the initial phase, about 60% of participants showed significant tumor reduction within 6 months, better than what we're seeing with your current regimen." Hope flickered briefly in Claire's chest, quickly tempered by pragmatism. "I'd like the information, please. I'll review it and let you know my decision next week." As Claire left the medical center, her phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. "Closing finalized. Celebrating with the team tonight. Home tomorrow afternoon. How are you feeling?" She stared at the message, imagining Christopher and Amber at some exclusive Miami restaurant, champagne flowing, her husband's hand casually resting on the younger woman's thigh beneath the table. The image should have hurt, but instead it merely strengthened her resolve. "Much better," she replied. "Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow." That evening, as the Santa Ana wines continued to rattle the windows of the Bel Air mansion, Claire received an unexpected visitor. The security system announced a car at the gate, and the camera feed showed a sleek Jaguar F-Type. Jessica Winters, Christopher's now former assistant. Claire buzzed her through, curious about this unannounced visit. Jessica appeared at the front door, looking simultaneously determined and terrified, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest like armor. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry for coming unannounced," she began as Claire ushered her into the living room, "but I thought, I have information you might want to see before Mr. Carter returns." Claire studied the younger woman carefully. Jessica had worked for Christopher for 7 years, starting as an intern and rising to become his executive assistant, a position that gave her unprecedented access to his professional and, inevitably, personal affairs. "What kind of information?" Claire asked, gesturing for Jessica to sit. Jessica placed the portfolio on the coffee table between them. "Financial records, travel itineraries, emails, things I shouldn't have copies of, technically speaking. But when you work for someone that closely for that long, you learn to keep insurance." "Insurance?" Claire echoed, intrigued. Jessica met her gaze directly for the first time. "Mr. Carter has a habit of asking his staff to do things that push ethical boundaries. Nothing explicitly illegal usually, but gray area stuff. Most people quit within a year. I stayed because the compensation was excellent, and I was learning the real estate development business from the inside." She tapped the portfolio. "But there are lines I won't cross. When he asked me to book adjoining hotel rooms for him and Ms. Walsh under different names, using company funds, that was one thing. When he started moving money through shell companies and pressuring me to backdate documents, that was another." Claire reached for the portfolio, her pulse quickening. "And when he abandoned his wife during cancer treatment for a woman half her age." Jessica had the grace to look ashamed. "That was the final straw. I should have come forward sooner, but you were protecting your career," Claire finished for her. "I understand. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator." She opened the portfolio, finding neatly organized sections labeled with dates and categories. Even a cursory glance revealed a treasure trove of evidence. Credit card statements showing purchases Claire had never seen, email exchanges with offshore banking representatives, property documents for the Cabo development. "Why are you giving me this?" Claire asked, though she suspected the answer. Jessica straightened her shoulders. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because Mr. Carter threatened to blacklist me in the industry when I resigned. Said he'd make sure I never worked in real estate development in California again." A small, humorless smile touched Claire's lips. "Christopher always did believe in mutually assured destruction as a negotiating tactic." "Exactly," Jessica nodded. "So this is my counteroffer. I have copies of everything here. Use it however you need to." All I ask is that if there's fallout, you remember that I came to you voluntarily." Claire studied the young woman with newfound respect. "What are your plans now?" "I have a job offer in Seattle. Commercial development firm, smaller than Carter Properties but with a better reputation for ethics. I start next month." "Smart move," Claire approved, getting out of Christopher's orbit entirely. She closed the portfolio. "Thank you for this, Jessica. It may prove extremely valuable." After Jessica left, Claire spent hours reviewing the documents, cross-referencing them with what she'd already discovered. A clear pattern emerged. Christopher had been systematically diverting company resources to fund the Cabo project, which appeared to be registered solely in his name. More disturbingly, he had begun liquidating some of their personal assets without consulting her, transferring funds to accounts she had no access to. He was preparing an exit strategy. The realization should have devastated her, but instead, Claire felt an odd sense of clarity. Christopher wasn't just betraying her as a husband, he was actively working to ensure she would be left with as little as possible if she discovered his infidelity or if her illness worsened. Claire was still awake at 2 a.m. when her phone rang. "Michael." "Did I wake you?" he asked when she answered. "No, I'm up. What's going on?" Michael's voice was tense with suppressed excitement. "I found something. About Amber Walsh. She's not just arm candy, Claire, she's connected." Claire sat up straighter. "Connected how?" "Her uncle is Victor Santoro." The name hit Claire like a physical force. Victor Santoro was a real estate developer with notorious ties to organized crime families on the East Coast. His projects in Atlantic City and Miami had been investigated multiple times by federal authorities, though charges never seemed to stick. "Are you certain?" she asked, her mind racing. "Positive. She uses her mother's maiden name professionally, Walsh instead of Santoro, but the connection is there if you dig deep enough. And here's where it gets interesting. Guess who's the silent financial partner in Christopher's Cabo development?" "Victor Santoro," Claire breathed, pieces falling into place. "Christopher's been laundering money for the Santoro family through legitimate development projects." "It looks that way," Michael confirmed. "The Cabo property is perfect for it. Luxury villas selling for cash to private investors who may or may not exist." Claire processed this revelation, its implications rippling through her plans like a stone dropped in still water. "This changes everything, Michael. If Christopher is involved with the Santoros, it's dangerous," Michael finished for her. "Maybe we should take this to the authorities, Claire. The FBI would be very interested in these connections." "Not yet," Claire decided after a moment's thought. "We need more concrete evidence, and involving federal authorities too soon might limit our options for how this plays out." "Our options?" Michael sounded concerned. "Claire, we're talking about potential organized crime connections. This isn't just about Christopher cheating anymore." "No," she agreed. "It's much bigger than that, which means my response needs to be proportional." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Michael, I need you to trust me. I'm not going to do anything reckless, but I need to handle this my way." The line went silent for a long moment before Michael responded. "I do trust you. Just be careful. These aren't people who play by the rules." "Neither am I," Claire replied softly. "Not anymore." After ending the call, Claire moved to the master bedroom balcony, wrapping herself in a cashmere throw against the persistent Santa Ana winds. The city sprawled before her, a carpet of twinkling lights stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, her husband was preparing to return home, unaware that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. She thought about the clinical trial Dr. Feldman had mentioned. 60% success rate. Better odds than she'd had recently, but still a gamble. And Claire had never been a gambler. Until now. The next morning, Claire contacted Eleanor with a request for an urgent amendment to her estate planning documents. By noon, she had called Dr. Feldman to enroll in the UCLA clinical trial, and by 3 o'clock, she was seated in the living room, composed and outwardly serene, when she heard Christopher's Aston Martin pull into the driveway. "Honey, I'm home," he called, his voice echoing through the marble foyer. The sound of his wheeled suitcase followed, then his footsteps approaching the living room. Christopher appeared in the doorway, tanned from the Miami sun, his custom suit as impeccable as always. If guilt weighed on him, it didn't show in his confident posture or the easy smile he directed at her. "Hey there," he said, crossing to kiss her cheek. "You look better. some color back in your face. Claire accepted the kiss without returning it. How was Miami? Productive? Very. Christopher loosened his tie, heading for the bar cart. We closed the deal, smoothed over the permit issues. The Brickell Avenue project is back on track. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, not offering her a drink. Any news from Dr. Feldman? Actually, yes. Claire watched him carefully. She's recommended me for a clinical trial at UCLA. Cutting-edge immunotherapy approach. I've decided to enroll. Christopher's glass paused halfway to his lips. A clinical trial, isn't that experimental? Risky? All treatments have risks, Claire replied calmly. This one offers better odds than my current protocol. Christopher frowned, taking a seat across from her. Have you really thought this through? We should get other opinions, consult with specialists at Cedars-Sinai or Mayo Clinic. His sudden concern might have touched her a week ago. Now it only highlighted his hypocrisy. I've made my decision, Claire said firmly. The trial begins next week. Christopher stared at her, clearly unaccustomed to this assertiveness. Okay, he finally said, a note of uncertainty in his voice. If you're sure, I just want what's best for you. Do you? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken accusations. Christopher's expression flickered, a momentary crack in his performance. Of course I do. You're my wife. Claire decided to test the waters to see how committed he was to his deception. I had an interesting visitor while you were gone. Jessica came by to say goodbye. If she had expected visible panic, she was disappointed. Christopher merely raised an eyebrow, taking another sip of bourbon. Did she? That's surprising. She wasn't exactly forthcoming when she gave notice. She mentioned she's taking a position in Seattle, Claire continued, watching him closely. Apparently, the LA development scene has become too ethically challenging for her. A flash of something, anger, concern, crossed Christopher's face before he masked it with a dismissive wave. Jessica always was idealistic. Real estate development requires pragmatism and flexibility. Not everyone is cut out for it. Claire hummed non-committally. She seemed quite capable to me, just unwilling to compromise her principles. Christopher's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, I wish her luck in Seattle. I'll need to hire a replacement immediately. The Shanghai investors are coming next week, and the preliminary work on the Cabo project is ramping up. There it was, the first direct mention of Cabo. Claire felt a thrill of satisfaction that he'd introduced it himself. Cabo? She asked innocently. That's new. I don't remember the board approving a development in Mexico. Christopher set his glass down with deliberate care. It's still in the exploratory phase. Not ready for board presentation yet. I see, Claire nodded. Who's handling the legal work on that? Not Westwood Blackwell, I assume, since Eleanor hasn't mentioned it. The questions were becoming more pointed, and Christopher's expression grew wary. We're using a local firm in Mexico City. International real estate requires specialized expertise. Claire decided to push further. And the financing? Given the current market volatility, backing a new international development seems risky. Christopher stood abruptly, moving to refill his glass. The financing is solid. Private investors with deep pockets and a high tolerance for initial runway costs. He turned to face her, his expression now openly suspicious. What's with the third degree, Claire? Since when are you interested in the operational details of Carter Properties? Claire met his gaze steadily. Since my husband started making major business decisions without consulting his partner of 20 years. Since offshore accounts began appearing under variations of our names. Since luxury properties in foreign countries started being developed outside the corporate structure. She paused, letting her words sink in. Since around the same time, Amber Walsh entered the picture, I'd estimate. The glass slipped from Christopher's hand, shattering on the marble floor, bourbon splashing across his Italian leather shoes. The sound echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. What did you just say? His voice was dangerously quiet. Claire remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. You heard me, Christopher. I know about Amber, I know about Cabo, I know about the Santoro connection. The only question is, what are we going to do about it? Christopher's face drained of color, his tan suddenly sickly against his pallor. Claire, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but you're not well. The stress of your illness, the medications, they're affecting your judgment. The gaslighting attempt was so predictable that Claire almost laughed. Please don't insult my intelligence by suggesting I'm imagining things. It's beneath even you. Christopher's expression hardened, his initial shock giving way to calculation. He moved to stand directly in front of her chair, using his height in an unconscious attempt at intimidation. "What exactly do you want, Claire? Money? A bigger settlement when all this is over? Because if you're thinking of going public with half-baked theories about business dealings you don't understand, remember that your name is on most of these documents too. You'll go down with me." Claire looked up at him, unmoved by his attempt to loom over her. "What I want is for you to sit down and have an honest conversation for once in your life." Something in her tone, the absolute certainty perhaps or the complete lack of fear, gave Christopher pause. He retreated to the sofa across from her, his body language defensive. "Fine, let's talk," Claire nodded, maintaining the calm demeanor that had unnerved him. "First, let's establish some facts. You've been having an affair with Amber Walsh for approximately 8 months. You've established offshore accounts to move assets beyond my reach. You're developing a property in Cabo San Lucas, with Victor Santoro as your silent partner, using funds diverted from Carter Properties, and you've been planning your exit from the marriage, possibly from the country, for some time now." Christopher stared at her, apparently reassessing exactly how much she knew and how dangerous she might be. "You've been busy for someone undergoing chemotherapy." "I've had help," Claire acknowledged. "Loyal friends. Something you wouldn't understand." A muscle twitched in Christopher's jaw. "What do you want, Claire? Cut to the chase." "I want a divorce," she said simply, "but not a conventional one. I have certain requirements." Christopher barked a laugh. "Requirements? You're not exactly in a position to make demands. You're sick, possibly dying, and any judge would take one look at your condition and question your mental capacity for litigation." The cruelty of his words struck like physical blows, but Claire didn't flinch. "Perhaps, but judges might also be interested in evidence of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy with known criminal organizations. The IRS would certainly have questions about those unreported offshore transfers." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Christopher's face. "You're bluffing. You don't have evidence of anything illegal. Would you like to test that theory?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm quite prepared to send everything I have to the FBI, the SEC, and the California Attorney General's office tomorrow morning." The standoff stretched between them, neither willing to back down. Finally, Christopher's shoulders slumped slightly, the first genuine reaction she'd seen from him. "What are your requirements?" he asked, the word bitter on his tongue. Claire leaned forward, intensity radiating from her despite her frail frame. "First, you will transfer all your shares of Carter Properties to Michael Dawson, effective immediately. He will become CEO with full control of company operations." "That's insane," Christopher exploded. "Carter Properties is my company. I built it from nothing." "We built it," Claire corrected him coldly, "with my legal expertise, my family connections, and my willingness to forgo having children to support your ambitions. And now you'll sign it over or face federal indictments." Christopher ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "Fine, what else?" "Second, you will liquidate the Cabo development and return all investor funds, dissolving any partnership with Victor Santoro cleanly and permanently." Christopher paled. "You don't understand what you're asking. Santoro isn't someone you can simply walk away from." "That's your problem to solve," Claire replied implacably. "Third, you will sign over this house and all domestic assets to me. You may keep your personal belongings and whatever funds you've already moved offshore. I have no interest in pursuing you across international banking jurisdictions." Christopher stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "And if I refuse?" "Then tomorrow morning, the FBI will receive comprehensive documentation of your activities, along with witness statements from Jessica Winters and others. I imagine federal prosecutors would be particularly interested in your connection to the Santoro family." The silence that followed was electric with tension. Christopher stood and paced the room, his mind visibly racing through scenarios, calculating odds, searching for leverage. "You'd really do this?" he finally asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. "After 20 years together? You'd destroy everything we've built?" "No, Christopher," Claire said quietly. "You did that when you betrayed me. Not just with Amber, but with every lie, every hidden account, every decision to plan your future without me in it. I'm simply ensuring that the consequences fall where they belong." Christopher's expression darkened. "And if I agree to these outrageous terms, what guarantees do I have that you won't send the evidence anyway?" "You have my word," Claire said, "which, unlike yours, still means something." Christopher laughed bitterly. Your word. That's it. That and a legally binding agreement that Eleanor has prepared. Sign the documents transferring assets as I've outlined, and the evidence remains sealed unless you violate the terms. Christopher moved to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds of the estate he was being asked to surrender. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I learned from the best, Claire replied, a hint of sad acknowledgement in her tone. You always said anticipating your opponent's moves was the key to winning any negotiation. He turned to face her, something like reluctant respect flickering in his eyes. And if I sign, what happens to us? To this marriage? It's already over, Claire said softly. It has been for some time, we're just making it official. Christopher nodded slowly, the fight draining from him. I'll need to consult with my attorney. Of course, Claire agreed. The documents will be ready tomorrow. You have 48 hours to sign, or the evidence goes to the authorities. As Christopher moved to leave the room, a thought seemed to occur to him. He paused at the doorway, looking back at his wife. What about your cancer treatments? The clinical trial? How will you manage alone? For the first time, Claire allowed a genuine smile to touch her lips. I won't be alone, Christopher. Unlike you, I understand the value of loyalty. After he left the room, Claire remained seated, listening to his footsteps receding down the hallway, the sound of the master bedroom door closing. She had expected to feel triumph, or at least vindication. Instead, she felt only a profound weariness, and the quiet certainty that this was merely the opening gambit in a game that was far from over. Later that night, as Claire prepared for bed in one of the guest rooms, her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Back off while you still can. No signature was needed. The threat was clear enough. Claire stared at the message, her hand steady despite the implicit danger. Christopher had clearly reached out to Santoro already. The stakes had just been raised significantly. She took a photo of the message before deleting it, then sent it to both Michael and Eleanor with a simple caption. It begins. The UCLA Medical Center buzzed with the controlled chaos typical of world-class research hospitals. Claire sat in a private consultation room, the sterile environment a stark contrast to the luxurious aesthetics of her usual treatment facility. Here, function trumped form, medical equipment crowded the space, and the furniture prioritized practicality over comfort. Dr. Famwi, Halisha Patel, the lead researcher for the immunotherapy trial, reviewed Claire's medical records with methodical precision. In her early 40s, with intelligent eyes behind sleek glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor, Dr. Patel had earned her reputation as one of the country's foremost oncological researchers. Mrs. Carter, while your case meets our trial criteria, I want to be completely transparent about what you're undertaking. Doctor, Patel said, setting aside the tablet containing Claire's medical history. This treatment protocol is rigorous, and the side effects can be severe, significantly more intense than your current chemotherapy regimen. Claire nodded, her hands folded calmly in her lap. I understand. Dr. Feldman explained the risks. Explaining and experiencing are quite different, Dr. Patel replied, her gaze direct. We've seen promising results, but there have also been serious adverse reactions. 3 patients have had to withdraw from the trial due to complications. What kind of complications? Claire asked. Immune system overactivation leading to inflammation of vital organs, including the heart and lungs. 1 patient developed temporary kidney failure requiring dialysis. Claire absorbed this information without flinching. And if it works? Dr. Patel's expression softened slightly. If it works, we've seen tumors shrink by up to 70% within 3 months. In 2 cases, patients have gone into complete remission. Complete remission. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Claire thought of all she had set in motion, the complex web of consequences now unfolding around Christopher. Would she live to see it through? When would we start? She asked. Immediately, Dr. Patel replied. First infusion today, if you consent. We'll need you to remain in the hospital overnight for monitoring after each treatment, at least for the first month. Claire hesitated, considering the implications. I'll need to make some arrangements. My husband and I are separating. There are legal matters in progress. Dr. Patel nodded, unsurprised. Cancer puts extraordinary strain on relationships. Unfortunately, your situation isn't uncommon. No, Claire agreed, a hint of bitterness coloring her voice. Just particularly ill-timed. After signing the extensive consent forms and scheduling her first treatment for the following morning, Claire exited the hospital into the bright California sunshine. Michael waited by his Range Rover in the parking structure, concern evident on his face as he helped her into the passenger seat. "How did it go?" he asked, sliding behind the wheel. "I start tomorrow," Claire replied, fastening her seatbelt. "I'll be in the hospital overnight after each treatment, at least initially." Michael nodded, navigating out of the parking structure. "I'll arrange for someone to be with you. Diane has already volunteered to take shifts." Claire smiled faintly, touched by his wife's generosity. "Thank you, but right now we have more pressing matters. Any news from Eleanor?" Michael's expression grew serious. Christopher's attorney requested a meeting. They're convening at Eleanor's office at 2 o'clock. Claire checked her watch. Just over an hour from now. "And the other matter?" Michael hesitated before answering. "We've been monitoring the offshore accounts. There's been activity, a transfer of $5 million from the Cayman Islands holding company to a numbered account in Zurich. He's moving assets beyond reach," Claire said, unsurprised, "preparing his escape route." "It gets worse," Michael continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The board received an anonymous email this morning containing vague allegations about financial improprieties at Carter Properties, suggesting an internal investigation. The stock dropped 12% before we could issue a statement." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Santoro?" "Almost certainly. It's a warning shot. Demonstrate what they could do if pushed. Or Christopher trying to destabilize the company before control transfers," Claire mused. "Either way, it changes nothing." "The documents are ready." Michael nodded, turning onto Wilshire Boulevard. "Eleanor has everything prepared, but Claire—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Have you considered that forcing Christopher into a corner might be dangerous? These are people who don't play by normal rules." "I'm dying, Michael," Claire said quietly. "Whether this clinical trial works or not, my long-term prognosis remains poor. What more can they threaten me with?" Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "There are worse things than death." Claire reached over to touch his arm. "I know you're worried, but I've taken precautions." She didn't elaborate, and Michael didn't press for details. They rode in silence until reaching the sleek high-rise that housed Westwood, Blackwell and Associates. As they pulled into the underground parking, Michael turned to her. "Whatever happens in there, remember that you're not alone in this." Claire squeezed his hand gratefully. "I know." Eleanor Blackwell's corner office offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles, the Hollywood Hills visible in the distance through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space exuded power, from the imposing mahogany desk to the wall of legal tomes and case precedents, many authored by Eleanor herself. Christopher was already seated when Claire entered, flanked by Alexander Hoffman, a shark of a divorce attorney known for representing high-profile clients. Christopher's expression remained carefully neutral, though Claire noted the shadows beneath his eyes, the slight disarray of his usually impeccable appearance. The past 48 hours had clearly taken a toll. "Claire," he acknowledged tersely. "Christopher," she replied with equal brevity, taking a seat across from him. Michael positioned himself beside her, while Eleanor remained standing, a subtle power move that established her control over the proceedings. "Let's get straight to business," Eleanor began, her tone brisk. "Mr. Carter, we've prepared the documents as discussed. Transfer of Carter Properties controlling interest to Michael Dawson, liquidation of the Cabo San Lucas development, and division of marital assets with the Bel Air residence and domestic holdings transferred to Mrs. Carter." Hoffman leaned forward, his expression disdainful. "These terms are completely unreasonable and potentially constitute duress. My client has built Carter Properties over 20 years. Transferring control under threat is both unethical and likely unenforceable." Eleanor smiled thinly. "Perhaps your client should have considered ethics before engaging in questionable financial practices and extramarital affairs while his wife battles cancer. Personal indiscretions, while regrettable, have no bearing on corporate ownership," Hoffman countered. "As for these alleged financial improprieties, you've provided no evidence of wrongdoing." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to see the evidence, Mr. Hoffman? I have copies ready for the SEC and FBI, but I'd be happy to provide you a preview." Christopher leaned over to whisper something to his attorney, who frowned deeply before responding in hushed tones. The private exchange continued for several tense moments before Christopher finally nodded, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. "We'll sign the property transfer documents," Hoffman announced reluctantly. But Mr. Carter requires certain assurances regarding the evidence Mrs. Carter claims to possess. Eleanor slid a folder across the polished table. This agreement stipulates that all evidence remains sealed in escrow with this firm, provided Mr. Carter complies fully with the terms. Any violation, any attempt to reclaim control of the company, interfere with Mrs. Carter's assets, or pursue legal action challenging these agreements results in immediate release of all materials to relevant authorities. Hoffman reviewed the document, making occasional notes in the margin. After several minutes, he conferred again with Christopher, their conversation becoming increasingly heated, though still inaudible to the others. Finally, Hoffman addressed Eleanor again. "My client is prepared to sign with one additional condition." He turned to Claire. "Mr. Carter requests 10 minutes alone with his wife before finalizing these agreements." Claire exchanged glances with Eleanor, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. 5 minutes, Claire conceded, in Eleanor's presence. "Alone," Christopher insisted, speaking directly to Claire for the first time. "What I have to say is between husband and wife." Something in his expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years, made Claire reconsider. "Fine. 5 minutes, alone. Then we sign." Eleanor and Michael exited reluctantly, followed by Hoffman, leaving the estranged couple facing each other across the expanse of polished mahogany. As soon as the door closed, Christopher's composed facade crumbled. "Claire, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Santoro isn't someone you can outmaneuver with legal documents and corporate transfers." "I'm not trying to outmaneuver him," Claire replied calmly. "That's your problem to solve, as specified in the agreement. Return his investment. Terminate the partnership cleanly." Christopher laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Terminate the partnership? People don't terminate partnerships with Victor Santoro. They disappear or they comply. Those are the options." "Then I suggest you comply with his terms while complying with mine," Claire said. "I'm sure a man of your negotiating skills can find a solution that satisfies all parties." Christopher studied her, genuine bewilderment in his expression. "What happened to you? This calculated ruthlessness. It's not you. Cancer happened. Betrayal happened." Claire held his gaze steadily. "You happened, Christopher. You showed me exactly how disposable I was the moment I became inconvenient. Consider this my education in self-preservation." His expression darkened. "Is that what this is about? Revenge because I couldn't handle watching you suffer? Because I made a mistake with Amber?" "A mistake?" Claire echoed incredulously. "You've been planning your exit for months, moving assets offshore, establishing a new life without me. That's not a mistake, Christopher. That's a calculated strategy." He at least had the decency to look away, unable to deny the truth of her words. "I never meant for any of this to hurt you." "Liar," Claire said softly. "Hurting me was collateral damage you were perfectly willing to accept. The only difference between us now is that I'm being honest about my intentions." Christopher leaned forward, desperation edging into his voice. "Claire, listen to me. You need to drop this. Take half the assets. Take the house. Take whatever you want from our life together. But leave Carter Properties alone, and for God's sake, stay away from anything connected to Santoro." "Why?" Claire challenged. "What aren't you telling me?" Christopher ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "The Cabo development isn't just a real estate project. It's a structure for moving certain funds internationally. Santoro needs that structure intact." Understanding dawned on Claire. Money laundering. That's what the property development is really about. Christopher didn't confirm or deny, but his expression said everything. "All I'm saying is that forcing me to liquidate that project puts both of us in danger. There are better ways to hurt me, if that's what you want." Claire considered his words, weighing the sincerity of his warning against his demonstrated capacity for manipulation. "Our 5 minutes are up," she said finally, rising from her chair. "Sign the documents, Christopher. Whatever arrangement you have with Santoro is your problem to resolve." As she moved toward the door, Christopher called after her, his voice strained. "Claire, the clinical trial at UCLA, is there real hope there?" The question caught her off guard, a momentary glimpse of the man she had once believed him to be, the man who had held her hand through her father's funeral, who had celebrated each of her professional victories as if they were his own. "Some," she admitted. "But hope has never been a strategy I relied on." She opened the door, signaling the end of their private conversation. The attorneys and Michael filed back in, the atmosphere charged with unresolved tension. Christopher signed the documents with mechanical precision, each stroke of the pen surrendering another piece of the empire he had spent decades building. When the final signature was complete, he stood abruptly. "Satisfied?" he asked Claire, his voice flat. She didn't answer directly. "The house will be empty tomorrow between 9 and 5. You can collect your personal belongings then. Anything remaining will be donated." Christopher nodded tersely, then departed with Hoffman in tow, leaving behind the scent of his cologne and 20 years of shared history. Eleanor gathered the signed documents, her expression victorious. "Congratulations, Claire. You've secured everything we aimed for." Yet Claire felt no triumph, only a bone-deep weariness, and the unsettling sense that something fundamental had shifted, not just in her external circumstances, but within herself. "I need to prepare for tomorrow," she said, rising carefully. "The first treatment is at 9 a.m. Michael drove her home in contemplative silence, neither of them acknowledging the hollow nature of their victory. At the Bel Air mansion, Michael insisted on coming inside, conducting a security sweep that Claire recognized as excessive, but appreciated nonetheless. "I've arranged for a private security detail," he informed her as they sat in the kitchen. "They'll be stationed at the gate starting tonight, and they'll accompany you to UCLA tomorrow." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Is that really necessary?" Michael's expression remained grave. "After what Christopher said about Santoro?" "Absolutely. These aren't people who accept defeat gracefully." "I'm not afraid of threats," Claire said quietly. "Maybe you should be," Michael countered, "at least until we know how Santoro will react to the Cabo liquidation. Promise me you'll keep the security team close." Claire nodded, touched by his concern. "I promise." After Michael left, Claire moved through the empty house, its spacious rooms suddenly too large, too quiet. In the master bedroom, she found evidence of Christopher's hasty packing, empty drawers left open, gaps in the closet where his favorite suits had hung, his nightstand cleared of personal items. On her vanity lay a small velvet box she didn't recognize. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings they had admired together in Paris on their 15th anniversary, but never purchased. A card in Christopher's handwriting read simply, "For better or worse." "I'm sorry, it was mostly worse at the end." The unexpected gesture cracked something in Claire's carefully maintained composure. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the earrings clutched in her palm, as tears she had refused to shed for months finally broke free. She wept for the young law students who had fallen in love over constitutional law debates, for the ambitious couple who had built a life of privilege and prestige, for the children they had never had, for the future that cancer had stolen before Christopher had taken what remained. When the tears finally subsided, Claire placed the earrings back in their box and set them aside. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of the clinical trial, a medical Hail Mary with no guaranteed outcome. She needed all her strength for the battle ahead. The following morning dawned clear and crisp, a rare day when the Los Angeles smog retreated enough to reveal the San Gabriel Mountains in the distance. Claire was preparing to leave for UCLA when her phone rang, a blocked number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Mrs. Carter." The voice was male, unfamiliar, with the faintest trace of an East Coast accent. "My name is not important. What is important is that we understand each other clearly." Claire's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "Who is this?" "Someone with a significant financial interest in Cabo Azul resorts," the voice replied. "An interest your husband has been instructed to protect, not liquidate. Santoro, or someone representing him." Claire moved to the window, scanning the grounds for the security team Michael had promised. She spotted a dark SUV stationed near the gate. "My husband's financial arrangements are no longer my concern," she said carefully. "The divorce proceedings are separating our interests completely." "That's where you're mistaken, Mrs. Carter," the voice continued, maintaining its unsettling calm. "Your actions have directly impacted investments that certain individuals take very seriously. Forcing the liquidation of Cabo Azul is problematic." "Take it up with Christopher," Claire replied, fighting to keep her voice even. "He signed the agreements willingly. Under duress, he claims, due to evidence you're holding over him, evidence that might interest other parties as well." A chill ran through Claire as the implied threat registered. "Are you asking me something specific, or just making vague insinuations?" The man chuckled, the sound utterly devoid of warmth. "Direct. I appreciate that. Here's direct for you. Withdraw the liquidation requirement for Cabo Azul. Allow your husband to maintain his current arrangement with his investors. In return, you keep the house, the domestic assets, and your health. My health is already compromised, Claire said, a strange calm settling over her. Cancer has a way of putting other threats in perspective. Cancer might give you time, Mrs. Carter. Some things don't. The line went dead, leaving Claire staring at her phone, the threat echoing in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly as she texted Michael. Just received a call. Santoro's people made contact, proceeding to UCLA as planned. Meet me there? His reply came instantly. On my way, don't leave without security. An hour later, Claire sat in a treatment room at UCLA Medical Center, an IV line delivering the experimental immunotherapy drugs into her bloodstream. Michael paced nearby, having arrived just as the treatment began. We should report the threat to the FBI, he insisted, keeping his voice low. This has gone beyond corporate maneuvering, Claire. These are explicit threats against your safety. Claire watched the clear liquid dripping from the medication bag, wondering if this treatment would save her life or merely prolong her suffering. And tell them what exactly? That my husband's organized crime connections are unhappy about our divorce settlement. That would trigger questions about Christopher's business dealings that could implicate all of Carter Properties, including you as CFO. Michael stopped pacing, his expression pained. I don't care about that. Your safety matters more than the company or my position. I've taken precautions, Claire assured him. The evidence is secure, with instructions for its release under specific circumstances. If anything happens to me, Christopher and his associates will face federal prosecution. That's not particularly reassuring, Michael said grimly. A posthumous victory isn't much of a victory at all. Before Claire could respond, Dr. Patel entered the treatment room, reviewing the monitors tracking Claire's vital signs. How are you feeling, Mrs. Carter? She asked, making notes on her tablet. Fine so far, Claire replied. How long before we know if it's working? We'll do comprehensive scans after 3 treatments, Dr. Patel explained. But watch for side effects over the next 24-48 hours. Fever, rash, joint pain. These could actually be positive signs that your immune system is responding to the therapy. After completing her assessment, Dr. Patel left Claire and Michael alone again. The treatment room's silence was broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment. I've been thinking, Michael said finally, pulling a chair beside her bed. Maybe you should consider leaving Los Angeles until things settle down with Santoro and Christopher. My sister's place in Vancouver is empty while she's on sabbatical in Europe. It's remote, peaceful, a good place to recover between treatments. Claire considered the suggestion. And the company? The transition requires your presence here. The CFO can work remotely for a few weeks, Michael shrugged. Eleanor has the legal side handled. There's nothing that requires our physical presence in Los Angeles right now. The idea of escape, from the mansion filled with memories, from Christopher's betrayal, from Santoro's threats, held undeniable appeal, yet something felt unresolved, incomplete. Let me get through this first treatment cycle, Claire decided. We'll reassess based on Dr. Patel's evaluation. Michael nodded, though concern remained etched in his features. At least consider staying at my house in the meantime. Diane would love the company, and the security situation would be easier to manage. I'll think about it, Claire promised, though the thought of imposing on Michael and his wife, even with their willing invitation, felt like yet another surrender. The treatment concluded without incident, though a bone-deep fatigue settled over Claire almost immediately. As promised, she remained in the hospital overnight for observation, Michael reluctantly leaving only after security personnel were stationed outside her room. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nurses checking vitals and the persistent discomfort of the hospital bed. During one such waking period, around 3 a.m., Claire reached for her phone, checking for messages out of habit. A text from an unknown number had arrived minutes earlier. Check your personal email. Heart racing, Claire opened her email application. At the top of her inbox sat a message with no subject line, sent from an anonymous address. She hesitated before opening it, anticipating another threat from Santoro's organization. Instead, she found herself staring at photographs, dozens of them contained in a zip file attachment. With shaking fingers, she downloaded and opened the file. The images loaded slowly, revealing their content in stages. Christopher and Amber, as expected, in various locations. intimate moments in hotel rooms, on private yachts, at exclusive resorts. But these weren't the images that caused Claire's breath to catch. It was the other people in some of the photos. Victor Santoro himself, instantly recognizable from news coverage of his various legal troubles. Christopher shaking hands with known associates of Mexican cartels. Meetings in luxury hotel suites with individuals Claire recognized as political figures from both sides of the border. The final photo, time-stamped just 3 weeks ago, showed Christopher in what appeared to be a private airplane hangar, standing beside Amber and an unidentified man, examining what was unmistakably a large case of cash. A text document accompanied the photos, containing dates, locations, and amounts, a meticulous record of transactions flowing through the Cabo development. The money laundering operation was far larger than Claire had imagined, involving sums in the hundreds of millions of dollars. As she stared at the evidence, a new message appeared in her inbox. Your husband's debt to certain individuals cannot be settled by simply liquidating the Cabo project. He has guarantees to honor. Consider this information a courtesy. How you use it will determine what happens next. Claire sat motionless in the hospital bed, the implications washing over her like a cold wave. Christopher wasn't just involved with Santoro's organization, he was deeply embedded in an international money laundering network. The Cabo property wasn't merely a development project with a questionable investor. It was the centerpiece of a sophisticated operation moving cartel money across borders, and she had just forced him to dismantle it. The realization struck her with stunning clarity. She wasn't just in danger from Santoro's organization. Christopher himself now represented a threat potentially more immediate, more personal. She had backed him into a corner from which there might be no legitimate escape. If he couldn't satisfy Santoro's demands, his life was forfeit, unless he found another solution, like ensuring the person who had created the problem no longer existed to enforce the agreement. Claire's finger hovered over Michael's contact information, ready to alert him to this new development. Then she paused, a troubling thought surfacing. Who had sent these photos? Who had access to document these meetings, these transactions, with such careful precision? Not Santoro. He would have no interest in creating evidence against himself. Not Christopher. These images would only incriminate him further. A third party then. Someone with their own agenda. Someone using her as a pawn in a larger game she didn't yet understand. Instead of calling Michael, Claire composed a new email to Eleanor, attaching the photos and accompanying documentation with a brief message. Additional evidence received from anonymous source. Secure immediately. Trust no one until we speak. She then deleted the original email and cleared her download history, a precaution that felt both necessary and futile. If someone could access these images of Christopher's activities, they could likely access her devices as well. The remainder of the night passed in a haze of hypervigilance and exhaustion. By morning, the first side effects of the immunotherapy treatment had begun to manifest: a low-grade fever, joint pain that radiated through her limbs, a generalized malaise that made even sitting upright an exercise in determination. Dr. Patel seemed pleased with these developments. Your immune system is responding, she explained during morning rounds. It's uncomfortable, but potentially a good sign. When can I go home? Claire asked, already dreading another night in the hospital. Your blood work looks stable, and your reaction is within expected parameters, Dr. Patel replied, reviewing the charts. If your fever doesn't spike further, we can release you this afternoon. You'll need someone to drive you home and stay with you for at least 24 hours, though. Claire nodded, already formulating plans. Not the Bel Air house, too isolated, too vulnerable. Not Michael's home. She wouldn't risk bringing danger to his doorstep. She needed a third option, somewhere neither Christopher nor Santoro's people would think to look. As if summoned by her thoughts, a nurse appeared at the doorway. Mrs. Carter, you have a visitor. Claire tensed, irrationally expecting to see Christopher, or perhaps one of Santoro's associates. Instead, Jessica Winters, Christopher's former assistant, entered hesitantly, clutching a small gift bag. Jessica, Claire greeted her, surprise evident in her voice. I thought you'd left for Seattle already. Next week, Jessica replied, approaching the bed. I heard you were here from a mutual friend. I wanted to see how you were doing. She placed the gift bag on the bedside table. Just some ginger candies and herbal tea. They helped my mother during her treatments. Thank you, Claire said, genuinely touched by the gesture. That's very thoughtful. Jessica glanced around the room nervously, then leaned closer. I also wanted to warn you. Mr. Carter came to my apartment last night, extremely agitated. He was asking if I had copies of certain documents, if I'd given them to you or anyone else. Claire's pulse quickened. What did you tell him? That I had no idea what he was talking about, Jessica said. But he didn't believe me. He threatened me, Mrs. Carter. Said if I was lying, I'd regret it. I've never seen him like that before. The information settled like lead in Claire's stomach. Christopher was unraveling, growing desperate. You should accelerate your plans to leave Los Angeles, she advised. Today, if possible. Jessica nodded. I've already booked a flight for tomorrow morning. She hesitated, then added, There's something else. Before I resigned, I overheard Mr. Carter on the phone with someone, a man with an accent. They were discussing contingency plans if the Cabo project faced regulatory issues. They mentioned a property in Belize, completely off the books, some kind of backup plan. Belize, Claire repeated, filing the information away. Did you hear any specifics? Location? Names? Jessica shook her head. Just that it was ready if needed, and unknown to the wife. An escape hatch, prepared in advance. Further evidence of Christopher's calculated betrayal. Thank you for telling me, Claire said. And Jessica, be careful. If Christopher contacts you again, don't engage. Just leave. After Jessica departed, Claire texted Michael, Need a secure place to stay after discharge. Not your house, not Bel Air, somewhere unexpected. His reply came within minutes. My boat at Marina del Rey. Security can meet you there. We'll arrange everything. The yacht, of course. Michael's 50-foot sailing vessel, docked at an exclusive marina where residents valued privacy above all else. Christopher knew about the boat, but would never think to look for her there. It was perfect. Claire was completing discharge paperwork when her phone rang. Eleanor. I received your email, the attorney said without preamble. The additional evidence has been secured offline. Claire, this is far beyond what we anticipated. These connections to Mexican cartels. This isn't just money laundering. It's potentially a matter of national security. I know, Claire acknowledged, which makes our position both stronger and more dangerous. We need to consider approaching federal authorities, Eleanor continued. With this evidence, we could negotiate immunity for your cooperation. Not yet, Claire decided. First, I need to understand who sent these photos and why. Someone has been documenting Christopher's activities very carefully, someone with access and resources. A rival organization, Eleanor suggested. Or perhaps law enforcement already has an investigation in progress. Possibly, Claire agreed. But why send the evidence to me? Why now? To ensure Christopher's compliance with Santoro, Eleanor theorized. If he fails to resolve the Cabo situation, these images could be released, destroying him legally as well as otherwise. The implication hung between them. Christopher now faced pressure from multiple directions, making him increasingly unpredictable. And unpredictability in a man with organized crime connections was dangerous indeed. I'm being discharged this afternoon, Claire informed her. I'll be staying somewhere secure while we determine next steps. I'll contact you tomorrow once I'm settled. After ending the call, Claire finished the discharge process. A hospital volunteer helped her to the entrance, where Michael waited beside his Range Rover, the security detail following discreetly in a separate vehicle. How are you feeling? He asked, helping her into the passenger seat. Like I've been hit by a truck, Claire admitted, but that's apparently a good sign. Michael looked skeptical but didn't argue. The boat is ready. Diane stocked the refrigerator and made up the master stateroom. The security team will maintain a presence at the marina, and I'll stay aboard with you tonight. Claire leaned back against the headrest, fatigue weighing on her like a physical presence. You've thought of everything. Not everything, Michael replied grimly. I still don't have a solution for the Santoro situation, or for Christopher, who isn't answering calls from anyone at the company. He's planning his exit, Claire said, sharing Jessica's information about the Belize property. We need to move quickly to secure company assets before he can access them. Michael nodded, his expression darkening. I've already frozen his corporate accounts and credit cards. The board meets tomorrow to formalize the leadership transition, but personal assets he's already moved offshore are beyond our reach. They drove in companionable silence through the Los Angeles afternoon traffic, the sun beginning its descent toward the Pacific. Claire found herself dozing intermittently, the immunotherapy treatment and emotional exhaustion taking their toll. She was jarred awake by Michael's sharp intake of breath and the sudden deceleration of the vehicle. "What is it?" she asked, disoriented. Michael gestured toward the road ahead, where flashing emergency lights illuminated a roadblock. Police cruisers and fire trucks blocked all lanes, officers directing traffic toward a mandatory exit. "Accident," Claire guessed, noting the helicopter hovering overhead. Michael rolled down his window as they approached a uniformed officer. "What's happened?" "Gas main explosion," the officer replied mechanically. "Marina del Rey area is being evacuated as a precaution. You'll need to find an alternate route." Michael thanked him and rolled up the window, exchanging a significant look with Claire. Quite a coincidence. "Too convenient," Claire agreed, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Someone knew our destination. Michael immediately changed course, the security vehicle following close behind. "We need a backup plan." Claire's phone buzzed with an incoming text, the same unknown number from the previous night. "Marina isn't safe. Neither is Michael's house or yours. 24-hour head start. Use it wisely." She showed the message to Michael, whose hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Who the hell is this? And how do they know our plans?" "I don't know," Claire admitted. "But they've been right so far. First the photos, now this warning." "Photos?" Michael glanced at her sharply. "What photos?" Claire hesitated, realizing she hadn't shared the emailed evidence with him. "I received documentation last night showing Christopher's deeper involvement with Santoro and Mexican cartels. I sent it to Eleanor for safekeeping." "And you didn't tell me?" Michael's voice rose slightly, hurt evident beneath the anger. "I was trying to protect you," Claire explained. "The less you know about certain aspects of this situation, the safer you are." Michael's expression softened slightly. "Claire, we're in this together. No more unilateral decisions, please." She nodded, acknowledging the validity of his concern. "Agreed. Now where do we go?" Michael considered for a moment. "My sister has a cabin in Big Bear. Remote. Difficult to find unless you know it's there. We can head there while we regroup." "Perfect," Claire agreed, already feeling the fatigue of the treatment returning in waves. "How long a drive?" "About 2 hours, traffic permitting," Michael replied, heading toward the interstate. Claire leaned back, closing her eyes. "Wake me when we're out of the city." She drifted into an uneasy sleep, vaguely aware of the vehicle's movement and Michael's occasional quiet conversations with the security team via earpiece. Dreams came in fragments. Christopher's face contorted with rage, Santoro's associates in the airplane hangar, Jessica's warning. She was jolted awake by the cessation of movement. Opening her eyes, Claire found they had pulled into a gas station in what appeared to be a small mountain community. Tall pines surrounded the area, and the air held the crispness of higher elevation. "Where are we?" she asked, disoriented. "Just outside Big Bear," Michael replied, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Need to refuel and grab some supplies. The security team is right behind us." Claire nodded, still groggy from the combination of medication and exhaustion. "I'll wait here." Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly before exiting the vehicle. Through the windshield, Claire watched him enter the small convenience store attached to the gas station. The security SUV pulled up beside them, 2 men in suits scanning the area with professional vigilance. Claire's phone buzzed with an incoming call, a local number she didn't recognize. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Claire," Christopher's voice, tense and breathless. "Thank God. Listen to me carefully. You're in danger. Michael isn't who you think he is." Claire's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? How did you get this number?" "There's no time to explain," Christopher rushed on, his voice urgent. "Michael has been working with Santoro for years. He's been laundering money through a separate channel within Carter Properties, parallel to the Cabo project. The whole thing with Amber, the offshore accounts. It was a distraction, Claire. A way to keep you focused on me while he operated in the shadows." Claire's gaze snapped to the convenience store where Michael was now at the counter, paying for supplies. The security men remained outside, vigilant but seemingly unaware of the bombshell dropping on her phone. "That's absurd," she replied, though a seed of doubt had been planted. "Michael has been my rock through all of this. He's been helping me fight you." "Exactly," Christopher insisted. "Think about it, Claire. Who suggested transferring company control to him specifically? Who had access to company records that could be manipulated to implicate me? Who conveniently appeared as your savior the moment you needed one? "You're desperate," Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt. "So you'd say anything to drive a wedge between me and my allies. The evidence you received last night, the photos of me with Santoro. Ask yourself, who could have taken those? Who had access to those meetings? I thought they were private strategy sessions for the Cabo project. Michael was the only other person from our organization present." Claire's mind raced, remembering details from the photographs, angles suggesting someone at the table, not surveillance from afar, an insider. "If what you're saying is true," she challenged, "why would Michael expose the operation by sending me evidence that implicates Santoro? That makes no sense." "Because Santoro is cutting ties," Christopher explained rapidly. "The Marina del Rey explosion wasn't aimed at you. It was Michael destroying evidence on his boat. Claire, the 24-hour head start wasn't a warning from some benevolent third party. It was Michael setting up his exit, using you as cover." Through the windshield, Claire saw Michael exiting the store, walking toward the car with a plastic bag of supplies. The security men nodded to him respectfully. "I don't believe you," she said, though uncertainty colored her voice. "Check his phone," Christopher urged. "Look at his recent contacts. There's a number listed under VS Consulting. That's Victor Santoro. And Claire, ask him about Belize. Ask him about a property called Casa Azul. Watch his reaction." Michael was approaching the car, his expression shifting to concern as he noticed Claire on the phone. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Claire, please." Christopher's voice cracked with genuine emotion. "Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done wrong, and God knows that's plenty, I wouldn't lie about this. Your life depends on seeing the truth about Michael." The call ended just as Michael opened the driver's door. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting her expression. Claire forced a smile. "Just tired. The treatment hitting me harder than expected." Michael nodded sympathetically, placing the supplies in the back seat. "We're almost there. You can rest properly soon." As he settled into the driver's seat, Claire noticed him place his phone in the center console cup holder, a casual gesture. Nothing suspicious about it, yet her eyes fixed on the device, Christopher's words echoing in her mind. "Actually," she said, "I need to use your phone. Mine's almost dead, and I should text Eleanor our status." If Michael hesitated, it was barely perceptible. "Sure," he said, handing her the device. "No password. Just swipe up." Claire took the phone, her heart racing as she unlocked it. With deliberate casualness, she navigated to his contacts, scrolling through until there it was. VS Consulting, just as Christopher had said. Her gaze flickered to Michael, who was adjusting the climate controls, seemingly unconcerned. Could Christopher be telling the truth, or was this another manipulation, a desperate attempt to isolate her from her strongest ally? She needed more proof, something definitive. "The cabin sounds perfect," she commented, returning his phone to the cup holder. "Reminds me of that place you mentioned in Belize once. What was it called? Casa something?" Michael's hands froze on the steering wheel for just a fraction of a second, so brief she might have imagined it if she hadn't been watching for it. "I don't think I've ever mentioned a place in Belize," he said, his tone casual but his knuckles whitening around the wheel. "You must be thinking of someone else." "Maybe," Claire conceded, her mind racing. "Christopher had some investment there, I think." "Casa Azul, possibly?" This time the reaction was unmistakable. Michael's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing visibly at his temple. "Claire," he said, his voice carefully measured, "is something wrong? You seem strange." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed in the cup holder. The caller ID displayed VS Consulting. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect, terrible understanding passing between them. "Christopher called you," Michael said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "Yes," Claire admitted, seeing no point in denial. Michael sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping slightly. "And he told you about my connection to Santoro. Is it true?" Claire asked, though she already knew the answer. Michael's expression shifted, the familiar warmth receding, replaced by something harder, more calculating. "It's complicated, Claire. More complicated than Christopher could possibly understand, given his limited role." "Limited role?" Claire echoed, disbelief coloring her voice. "He's been moving millions through offshore accounts, meeting with cartel representatives." A small, condescending smile touched Michael's lips. Christopher was a frontman, a useful idiot with the right connections, reputation, and an ego easily manipulated by flattery and wealth. The real operation runs much deeper. The casual admission, delivered without remorse, struck Claire like a physical blow. All this time, you were using both of us. Not initially, Michael clarified, as if the distinction mattered. When we started Carter Properties, I genuinely believed in the company's potential. The Santoro connection came later, when we needed capital for expansion, and conventional investors were reluctant after the recession. His phone continued buzzing insistently. Michael glanced at it, then back at Claire. I should take this. Santoro is not someone who appreciates being sent to voicemail. By all means, Claire said coldly. Don't let me interrupt your criminal conspiracy. Michael's expression hardened. Criminal is a narrow perspective, Claire. We created thousands of jobs, revitalized entire neighborhoods, generated millions in tax revenue. The fact that some of our capital came from unorthodox sources doesn't negate the positive impact. Spare me the rationalization, Claire spat. Just answer your phone. Michael reached for the device, maintaining eye contact with Claire as he answered. Dawson here. Claire could hear the faint sound of an agitated voice on the other end, though the words were indistinct. Yes, she's with me, Michael replied, his tone businesslike. Heading to the secondary location now. No, that won't be necessary. I understand the timeline has accelerated. Yes, complete cleanup, as discussed. The clinical detachment in his voice sent a chill through Claire. This was not the Michael she thought she knew, the compassionate friend who had held her hand through chemotherapy, who had brought ginger ale and crackers when she couldn't keep food down. He ended the call, placing the phone back in the cup holder. That complicates things. What does? Claire asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Santoro is accelerating the timetable, Michael explained, as if discussing a minor schedule adjustment. Federal authorities are getting closer to the Cabo operation than we anticipated. We need to move quickly. Move where exactly? Belize, initially, Michael said. Then likely Europe. Santoro has connections in Monaco, banking relationships that can facilitate our transition. Our transition? Claire repeated incredulously. You can't possibly think I'm going anywhere with you. Michael studied her with an expression that mingled pity and calculation. Claire, I don't think you understand your situation. There are only two options here. You come with us, live comfortably on your share of the proceeds, and continue your treatment with the best oncologists money can buy. Or, he let the alternative hang unspoken between them. You'd kill me, Claire stated flatly. After everything we've been through. After pretending to care while I fought cancer. Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Perhaps genuine regret. I wasn't pretending, Claire. That's what makes this so difficult. I do care about you. I admire your strength, your intelligence. Under different circumstances, he shook his head. But business is business, and loose ends can't be tolerated in our line of work. So that's what I am now. A loose end. You became a loose end the moment you started investigating Christopher's affairs, Michael corrected. If you'd just accepted the divorce, taken your settlement and focused on your treatment, none of this would have been necessary. Claire laughed bitterly. Now it's my fault for not accepting betrayal gracefully, for fighting back when my husband abandoned me during cancer? I'm not saying it's fair, Michael conceded, just that there were safer paths available, and you chose the most dangerous one. He started the engine, the SUV humming to life beneath them. We should go. The security team is getting restless. Claire glanced at the men in the vehicle beside them. Not her protectors, she now realized, but her jailers. Michael's men all along. What about Christopher? She asked, playing for time as she assessed her options. Where does he fit in this scenario? Christopher has outlived his usefulness, Michael said matter-of-factly. He made costly mistakes, drew too much attention. The Amber situation was particularly stupid, a midlife crisis that compromised operational security. So he's a loose end too, Michael nodded. Unfortunately for him, yes. He pulled out of the gas station, the security vehicle following close behind. Though his call to you was unexpected, I thought he'd be focused on his own escape by now. Despite everything Christopher had done, Claire felt a twinge of something. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. In his final moments of freedom, he had tried to warn her. Perhaps there was more to the man she had married than the selfish coward who had abandoned her. How long have you and Santoro been planning this exit strategy? She asked, needing to keep Michael talking while she considered her limited options. There's always an exit strategy in this business, Michael replied. But the active preparation began about 8 months ago, when our intelligence suggested federal interest in Santoro's activities was intensifying. The Belize property was secured 6 months ago, offshore accounts established, identities prepared. Around the time Christopher began seeing Amber, Claire realized, while her husband was having an affair, Michael was planning to betray them both. The mountain road narrowed as they climbed higher, dense forest pressing in on both sides. Occasional glimpses of Big Bear Lake appeared through breaks in the trees, the water shimmering in the late afternoon sunlight. Claire's mind raced through scenarios, each more desperate than the last. The clinical trial drugs coursing through her system made her physically vulnerable. She doubted she could overpower Michael or outrun the security team. Her phone had no signal in these mountains, eliminating any possibility of calling for help. "What happens when we reach the cabin?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We rest tonight," Michael explained. "Tomorrow morning, a helicopter picks us up from a clearing about half a mile from the property. From there, private jet from a small airfield to Belize. And if I refuse?" Michael sighed, a sound of genuine regret. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be, Claire. I don't want to hurt you. But Santoro's organization doesn't tolerate risks, and you've become a significant one." As they rounded a sharp curve, Claire noticed a vehicle parked on the shoulder ahead, a black SUV with tinted windows, similar to their security escort. Michael tensed beside her, his hand moving instinctively to the inside pocket of his jacket. "Are you expecting someone?" Claire asked, hope flaring briefly. "No," Michael replied tersely. "Stay in the car." He slowed as they approached the parked vehicle, exchanging glances with the security team through the rearview mirror. As they drew alongside the SUV, its driver's door suddenly opened. Christopher stepped out, hands raised to show he was unarmed. Michael cursed under his breath, bringing their vehicle to a stop. The security SUV halted behind them, its occupants visibly alert, hands moving beneath jackets toward concealed weapons. "What the hell is he doing?" Michael muttered, more to himself than to Claire. Christopher approached slowly, his expression a mixture of determination and fear. He stopped several feet from their vehicle, maintaining eye contact with Michael through the driver's window. Michael lowered the window, his voice tightly controlled. "This is incredibly stupid, even for you, Chris." "I needed to see Claire," Christopher replied, his gaze shifting briefly to her, "to make sure she's okay." "She's fine," Michael said curtly. "Now get back in your car and drive away while you still can. Santoro's decision regarding your status isn't my jurisdiction, but I can tell you it's not in your favor." Christopher ignored the warning, his attention now fully on Claire. "Did you believe me? About Michael?" Before she could answer, Michael interrupted. "Enough. This conversation is over." He began to raise the window, but Christopher moved closer, placing his hand on the door. "Claire, whatever happens, Eleanor has everything she needs. The evidence, the contingency plans, it's all in place." Michael's patience visibly snapped. He turned to the security vehicle, making a sharp gesture. Both men immediately exited, moving toward Christopher with purposeful strides. "Last chance," Michael warned him. "Walk away now." Christopher stood his ground, eyes locked with Claire's. "I'm sorry for everything, Claire. For Amber. For leaving when you needed me most. You deserved better." The security men reached Christopher, each grasping an arm. He didn't resist as they began pulling him away from the vehicle. "Wait!" Claire called out, surprising herself as much as the others. "I want to talk to him." Michael turned to her, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "That's not happening." "5 minutes," Claire insisted. "After 20 years of marriage, I think I've earned that much." She met Michael's gaze directly, allowing a hint of vulnerability to show. "Please, Michael, for whatever our friendship once meant." Michael hesitated, visibly calculating risks and scenarios. Finally, he nodded sharply to the security men. 5 minutes, in full view, where we can see you both." The men released Christopher, who rubbed his arms where their fingers had dug in. Claire exited the vehicle, her legs unsteady from the immunotherapy treatment. The mountain air was thin and cold, causing her to shiver in her light sweater. Christopher moved toward her, stopping at a respectful distance. "You look terrible," he said, a ghost of their old familiarity in his voice. "Cancer and betrayal will do that," she replied dryly, his expression sobered. "I deserved that. I deserved worse." Claire studied the man she had once loved with complete trust, now a stranger in familiar packaging. "Did you know?" About Michael and Santoro? From the beginning? Christopher shook his head. Not at first. I thought Santoro was just another investor, albeit one with unusual requirements for privacy. By the time I understood the full scope of his operation, I was already compromised. They had evidence of me signing documents that facilitated money laundering, even if I didn't recognize it at the time. And Amber? A flush of shame colored his features. That was separate. My own weakness, my own failure, unforgivable, especially with your diagnosis. Claire nodded, accepting his admission without comment. Why risk coming here? Michael will never let you leave alive. I know, Christopher said simply. But I needed to try to save you at least. It's the one thing I can still do right. A lump formed in Claire's throat, unexpected emotion welling up despite her best efforts to remain detached. I don't understand. You could have escaped, started over somewhere. Not with what I know, Christopher replied grimly. Santoro doesn't leave loose ends, and I know too much about the operation. My days were numbered the moment you forced me to sign over the company to Michael. From the corner of her eye, Claire saw Michael checking his watch pointedly. Their time was running out. I have a plan, Christopher said, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. But I need to know if you have the evidence secured, as I mentioned on the phone. Claire nodded slightly. Eleanor has everything. Offline storage, multiple copies. Relief washed over Christopher's features. Good, that's our leverage, our insurance. What are you thinking? Claire asked, acutely aware of the security men watching their every move. Christopher took a deep breath. Federal agents are closing in on Santoro's operation. They've been building a case for months. I've been feeding them information. My attempt at an exit strategy. Claire stared at him in disbelief. You've been informing on Santoro? That's suicide. Maybe, Christopher acknowledged, but it was the only play I had left. And it might save you if we can stall Michael long enough. Michael's voice cut through their conversation. Time's up. Let's go, Claire. Christopher's eyes bore into hers, intense and urgent. Trust me one last time, please. Before she could respond, he suddenly grasped her arms, pulling her against him in what appeared to be an embrace. His lips brushed her ear, whispering urgently, "When I move, drop to the ground no matter what happens, stay down." Then, louder for their audience, "I love you, Claire. I always have, even when I didn't show it." The security men were already advancing, Michael exiting the vehicle with a thunderous expression. Christopher released Claire, turning to face them with his hands raised placatingly. "Just saying goodbye," he called, backing away slowly. "Get in the car, Claire," Michael ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Claire hesitated, torn between the uncertainty of Christopher's plan and the certainty of Michael's betrayal. The seconds stretched, tension mounting in the mountain air. Suddenly, Christopher reached inside his jacket. The security men immediately drew weapons, shouting commands that blurred together in Claire's ears. Everything happened in fragments after that, Christopher diving toward her, his body shielding hers as they fell to the asphalt, the deafening crack of gunfire. Michael's voice, urgent commands drowned by the thunder of helicopter rotors materializing over the ridge. Claire's world narrowed to the weight of Christopher above her, his breathing ragged in her ear. "Stay down," he gasped, though she could barely hear him over the approaching helicopter, and continued gunfire. Through a gap beneath Christopher's arm, she glimpsed uniformed figures rappelling from the helicopter, weapons raised, voices shouting commands that cut through the chaos. "FBI, drop your weapons! On the ground, now!" The security men hesitated, caught between the federal agents and loyalty to Michael and Santoro. Their indecision cost them precious seconds. The agents opened fire, precise shots that dropped both men where they stood. Michael made a desperate dash for the SUV, only to be cut off by agents approaching from the tree line. Surrounded, he slowly raised his hands, his expression a mask of cold fury as he glanced back at Claire and Christopher still huddled on the ground. "Mrs. Carter," a female agent approached cautiously, weapon lowered but ready. "Agent Sarah Delgado, FBI. Are you injured?" Claire struggled to form words, the adrenaline and medication creating a disorienting fog. "Christopher," she managed. "Check Christopher." The agent called for medical assistance, gently moving Christopher to assess his condition. Claire gasped as she saw the spreading crimson stain on his shirt. A bullet had found its mark, despite his protective maneuver. "Medic!" Agent Delgado shouted, applying pressure to the wound. "Hang in there, Mr. Carter. Help is coming." Christopher's eyes found Claire's, pain evident, but a strange peace also present. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the continued chaos around them. "Are you safe?" "Yes," Claire assured him, tears blurring her vision as she grasped his hand. "I'm safe. You saved me." A ghost of his familiar smile touched his lips. "First time I got something right in years." Paramedics arrived, gently moving Claire aside to work on Christopher. She watched in numb disbelief as they stabilized him for transport. The helicopter now landed on the road, rotors slowing. Agent Delgado helped Claire to her feet, supporting her as her legs threatened to buckle. "We need to get you both to a hospital," she said. "You can ride in the helicopter with your husband." "How did you find us?" Claire asked, still struggling to process the rapid sequence of events. "Your husband has been cooperating with our investigation into the Santoro organization for the past 3 months, Delgado explained. "When he realized Michael Dawson was taking you to the secondary location in Big Bear, he contacted his handler immediately. We've had surveillance on both properties, waiting for the right moment to move." Claire looked across to where Michael stood, handcuffed and surrounded by agents. Their eyes met briefly, his filled with cold rage, hers with dawning comprehension. "He was using us both," she said softly. "Christopher as the front man, me as the unwitting accomplice. And when you started investigating your husband's activities, you became a liability," Delgado confirmed. "Mr. Dawson had arranged for your disappearance once you reached Big Bear. Your husband's intervention likely saved your life. Christopher, the man who had abandoned her in her darkest hour, who had betrayed their marriage vows, who had planned a new life without her, had risked everything to save her. The irony was almost too much to bear." As the paramedics loaded Christopher into the helicopter, Claire followed, her body moving on autopilot. She sat beside him, holding his hand as medical personnel worked frantically to stabilize him. "Why?" she asked, leaning close so he could hear her over the engine as it roared to life. "After everything, why risk your life for me?" Christopher's eyes found hers, pain and medication making his gaze unfocused. "Because you were right," he said, each word clearly an effort. "About everything. What I did to you was unforgivable. This," he gestured weakly to his wound, "this doesn't make it right, but maybe it's a start." The helicopter lifted off, banking toward the nearest trauma center. Below, Claire caught a final glimpse of Michael being led to an FBI vehicle, his empire crumbling around him, just as he had orchestrated the fall of Christopher's. As the landscape blurred beneath them, Claire felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. Everything she had believed about her marriage, about Michael's friendship, about the life she had built, all of it had been constructed on shifting sands, illusions that had crumbled when tested by crisis. Yet here, in this moment of ultimate truth, she found herself holding the hand of the man who had both betrayed and saved her, uncertain what the future held, but suddenly intensely aware of its precious fragility. Christopher's eyes fluttered closed, his breathing shallow but stable. The medical team worked efficiently around him, their quiet professionalism a stark contrast to the violence they had just escaped. "He's stable for now," one paramedic informed Claire. "But he's lost a lot of blood. The surgeons will be waiting when we land." Claire nodded, maintaining her grip on Christopher's hand. Whatever happened next, whether he survived or not, whether her cancer treatment succeeded or failed, nothing would ever be the same again. And perhaps, she thought as the helicopter sped toward an uncertain future, that was exactly as it should be. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment created a hypnotic backdrop to the sterile quiet of the hospital room. Claire sat beside Christopher's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath the thin hospital blanket. 3 days had passed since the confrontation on the mountain road. 3 days of surgeries, FBI interviews, and moments of stark clarity amid the chaos. Christopher had survived the emergency surgery, the bullet having narrowly missed his heart, but collapsed his left lung and fractured 2 ribs. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery, though he remained heavily sedated, drifting in and out of consciousness. Claire's own condition had stabilized after the initial immunotherapy treatment, though fatigue and joint pain persisted as her body fought both the cancer and the powerful drugs meant to combat it. Dr. Patel had visited her here at Cedars-Sinai, arranging for her second treatment to be administered under the watchful eyes of the hospital's oncology team. "Mrs. Carter," Claire looked up to find Agent Delgado standing in the doorway, her professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. "The doctors tell me your husband's condition has improved," Delgado said, entering the room. "Yes," Claire confirmed, her voice rough from disuse. "They've reduced his sedation. He should be more coherent soon." Delgado nodded, pulling up a chair on the opposite side of Christopher's bed. "I know this isn't ideal timing, but we need to discuss next steps. The Santoro investigation has accelerated significantly since Mr. Dawson's arrest." "Have you located Victor Santoro?" Claire asked. "Not yet. He went underground as soon as the operation was compromised." Delgado's expression tightened with professional frustration. "But we've frozen most of the accounts connected to the Cabo development and arrested 3 of his key lieutenants. It's only a matter of time." Claire studied the FBI agent, assessing her reliability. In the past week, her trust had been so thoroughly shattered that caution now felt like the only reasonable response to any information. "What happens to Christopher?" she asked directly. "He was involved in Santoro's operation, regardless of his recent cooperation." Delgado leaned forward, her voice lowering slightly. "Your husband's situation is complicated. Yes, he facilitated money laundering through Carter Properties, knowingly or not initially. However, his cooperation has been instrumental in building our case against Santoro's organization. The U.S. Attorney's Office is considering a cooperation agreement that would significantly reduce any potential charges." "And what would that entail?" "Full disclosure of all information related to Santoro's operation, testimony against Michael Dawson and others involved, surrender of any assets derived from illegal activities." Delgado paused, her expression softening slightly. In return, he'd likely face minimal jail time, possibly even probation depending on the value of his continued cooperation. Claire absorbed this information, emotions warring within her. The man lying in this hospital bed had betrayed her trust profoundly, yet had also risked his life to save hers. How could she reconcile these 2 versions of Christopher? "And what about me?" she asked. "Where do I stand legally in all this?" "Our investigation has found no evidence that you were aware of or involved in the money laundering operation," Delgado assured her. "Your actions after discovering your husband's infidelity and financial manipulations appear to have been motivated by personal betrayal, not criminal intent." A bitter laugh escaped Claire's lips. "So my ignorance protects me. How ironic." "Not just your ignorance," Delgado corrected gently. "The fact that when you discovered concerning financial activities, you consulted with legitimate legal counsel rather than attempting to conceal them. That speaks to your character and intent." Before Claire could respond, a subtle change in Christopher's breathing caught her attention. His eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly, confusion giving way to recognition as his gaze settled on her face. "Claire," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse and the intubation during surgery. "I'm here," she replied, unsure what else to say to this man who had been simultaneously her betrayer and savior. Christopher's eyes shifted to Delgado, comprehension dawning. "The operation. Did it work?" "Mr. Dawson is in federal custody," Delgado confirmed, along with several key members of Santoro's organization. "Your information was invaluable." A ghost of satisfaction crossed Christopher's pale features. "Good. That's good." His focus returned to Claire, something vulnerable and earnest in his gaze. "You're safe?" "Yes," she assured him, touched despite herself by his concern. "Thanks to you." Agent Delgado stood, recognizing the need for privacy. "I'll give you 2 some time. Mr. Carter, when you're feeling stronger, we'll need to continue our debriefing." After the agent departed, silence descended upon the room, years of shared history and recent betrayals hanging unspoken between them. "The doctors say you'll recover," Claire finally said, keeping her voice neutral, "though physical therapy will be necessary for your shoulder." Christopher nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "And you? The clinical trial?" "Too early to tell," Claire answered truthfully, "but I'm continuing with the protocol." Another silence stretched between them, tense with unspoken questions. "Why did you call me?" Claire finally asked, the question that had been haunting her for days. "You could have escaped while Michael was focused on me. Why risk everything to warn me?" Christopher's gaze drifted to the hospital window, where Los Angeles sprawled beneath them, bathed in afternoon sunlight. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "Because losing you to cancer would have been a tragedy. Losing you to my mistakes was a failure. But losing you to Michael's betrayal after everything else. He paused, emotion tightening his features. That would have been unforgivable. You could have died, Claire pointed out, still struggling to reconcile this self-sacrificing act with the man who had abandoned her at her most vulnerable. Yes, Christopher agreed simply. And it would have been fair payment for what I did to you. The stark honesty in his voice caught Claire off guard. No excuses, no rationalizations, just acknowledgement of his failures. When did you start working with the FBI? She asked, changing direction slightly. Christopher shifted in the bed, seeking a more comfortable position. After you confronted me about Amber and the offshore accounts. When you forced me to transfer company control to Michael, Santoro's people made it clear I'd outlived my usefulness. I knew I was marked, either for elimination or as a scapegoat if the operation was compromised. So you went to the authorities to save yourself, Claire concluded, a hint of disappointment coloring her tone. Initially, yes, Christopher admitted. Self-preservation has always been my default setting, as you well know. His expression grew more somber. But then I learned the full extent of Michael's involvement, that he'd been using both of us from the beginning, positioning himself to take over completely once we were out of the picture. And that changed your motivation? Christopher's eyes met hers directly. It gave me a purpose beyond survival, a chance to do one thing right after so many wrongs. Claire studied him, searching for signs of the manipulative, self-serving man who had betrayed their marriage vows. Instead, she found someone she barely recognized, vulnerable, transparent, the armor of confidence and charm stripped away to reveal something raw underneath. I don't know what to do with this, she confessed. With you, with any of it. You don't have to decide anything now, Christopher said quietly, or ever if that's your choice. I forfeited any right to expectations when I left you facing cancer alone. The simple acknowledgement of his greatest betrayal, stated without defense or qualification, broke something loose in Claire's carefully guarded emotions. Why did you do it? She asked, the question that had tortured her for months finally emerging. Was it just Amber? Was I not enough anymore? Christopher closed his eyes briefly, pain that had nothing to do with his physical wounds crossing his features. When he opened them again, they shimmered with unshed tears. It was never about you not being enough, he said, each word weighed carefully. It was about me not being enough, not strong enough to face your mortality, not brave enough to stand beside you through the ugliness of cancer treatment, not honest enough to admit my own failings. He paused, gathering strength before continuing. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping the Santoro connection secret, that you were better off not knowing the danger. But the truth is, I was protecting myself from your judgment, from the consequences of my poor decisions. And Amber, Claire pressed, needing to understand this piece as well. Christopher's expression twisted with shame. The most cliched midlife crisis in history. She made me feel powerful, admired, immortal, everything that your diagnosis threatened. It was selfish, pathetic escapism. His honesty, however painful, gave Claire something she hadn't realized she'd been seeking. Not justification for his actions, but understanding of them. The betrayal remained undiminished, but the mystery surrounding it began to dissipate. I need time, she said finally, to process all of this, to decide what it means for me, for us, for the future, whatever that holds. Christopher nodded, acceptance in his eyes. Time is the one thing I can give you now. That and the truth, however ugly it might be. 2 weeks later, Claire stood at the windows of her Bel Air home, watching gardeners restore order to the landscaping that had suffered neglect amid the chaos of recent events. The familiar scene, workers trimming the immaculate hedges, tending the roses that bloomed alongside the pool, struck her as surreally normal against the backdrop of her transformed life. Christopher had been released from the hospital 3 days earlier, moving temporarily into a suite at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. His cooperation with federal authorities continued daily, his testimony helping to build the case against Michael Dawson and others in Santoro's organization. Claire's own days had settled into a new routine. Immunotherapy treatments at UCLA 3 times weekly, meetings with Eleanor regarding the future of her assets and Christopher's potential legal outcomes, and long, contemplative hours alone in the house that had once represented their perfect life together. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Claire moved through the familiar hallways, past the living room where she had first confronted Christopher about his betrayal, to the entryway where everything had begun to unravel. Jessica Winters stood on the doorstep, looking more relaxed than Claire had ever seen her. Gone was the corporate attire and tense posture of Christopher's executive assistant, replaced by casual clothing and an easier demeanor. "Jessica," Claire greeted her, genuine warmth in her voice. "Please, come in." "I hope I'm not interrupting," Jessica said, following Claire into the kitchen. "I wanted to see you before I leave for Seattle tomorrow." "Not at all," Claire assured her, gesturing toward the breakfast bar. "Coffee?" Jessica nodded, settling onto a stool as Claire prepared 2 cups from the elaborate espresso machine Christopher had insisted upon installing during their kitchen renovation. "How are you feeling?" Jessica asked, her eyes taking in Claire's appearance with genuine concern. Claire considered the question honestly. "Physically, the side effects from the immunotherapy are challenging, but my oncologist says my body is responding well. The latest scans show the tumors have decreased in size by nearly 30%. "That's wonderful news," Jessica smiled. "And otherwise?" Claire handed Jessica her coffee before answering. "Otherwise is more complicated. Every day brings new revelations about the extent of Christopher and Michael's activities. The FBI briefings, the financial disentanglements." She shook her head. "Sometimes I feel like I've awakened in someone else's life." "I can't even imagine," Jessica sympathized. "When I resigned, I knew something wasn't right about Mr. Carter's operations, but the scope of it all, the money laundering, Michael's betrayal, it's beyond anything I suspected." "We were both deceived," Claire acknowledged, "though you had the good sense to distance yourself before the collapse." "Self-preservation," Jessica admitted, "though I felt guilty about not warning you more explicitly." "You did what you could," Claire assured her. "Coming here that day, sharing what you knew, it helped set everything in motion. Without those pieces of the puzzle, I might never have discovered Michael's true role." They sipped their coffee in companionable silence for a moment, 2 women united by their proximity to deception and their ultimate escape from it. "Have you spoken with Mr. Carter since his release from the hospital?" Jessica finally asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Briefly," Claire replied. "Phone calls, primarily about practical matters, his cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutors, the future of Carter Properties' legitimate assets, arrangements for him to collect more of his belongings. Not about personal matters." Claire's gaze drifted to the garden beyond the kitchen windows. "Those conversations feel premature. I'm still reconciling the man who betrayed me with the man who saved my life." "May I speak candidly?" Jessica asked hesitantly. "Please." Jessica set her coffee cup down, choosing her words carefully. "I worked closely with Mr. Carter for 7 years. I saw his flaws, the ego, the ethical compromises, the ability to compartmentalize uncomfortable truths. But I also saw how he changed after your diagnosis. The regret was genuine, even before the whole situation imploded." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're defending him?" "No." Jessica shook her head emphatically. "What he did was indefensible. I'm just suggesting that people are complex, capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine redemption, sometimes simultaneously." The observation struck Claire with unexpected force, not because it was profound, but because it articulated what she had been struggling to reconcile within herself. "Thank you for that perspective," she said quietly, "and for everything else. So I hope Seattle brings you the fresh start you deserve." After Jessica departed, Claire found herself drawn back to Christopher's home office, the room where she had first discovered evidence of his betrayal. The space had been thoroughly searched by FBI agents, file cabinets now empty, computer equipment confiscated, yet something compelled her to return here, to the epicenter of the deception that had shattered her life. She sat in Christopher's leather chair, running her fingers along the polished desktop where he had signed countless documents, made innumerable decisions that shaped their shared destiny. What had he thought during those moments? Had he ever considered the potential consequences of his choices? On impulse, Claire opened the center drawer, now empty except for a few paper clips and rubber bands the FBI had deemed irrelevant. As she began to slide it closed, her fingers detected a slight unevenness in the drawer bottom. Pressing gently, she felt a section give way, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the false bottom. Inside lay a single envelope, addressed simply to Claire in Christopher's distinctive handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she withdrew the letter, uncertainty warring with curiosity. The date on the upper corner, indicated it had been written just days after her cancer diagnosis, months before her discovery of his affair or the offshore accounts. Claire, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Either I've been exposed or eliminated, or you've discovered truths I've worked to keep hidden from you. First, know this. My involvement with Victor Santoro's organization began 3 years ago, when Carter Properties faced potential bankruptcy after the Westlake development failed. Michael introduced Santoro as a potential investor, willing to overlook our financial difficulties in exchange for certain structural advantages in how we managed international properties. I told myself it was a one-time necessity, a temporary compromise to save everything we'd built together. By the time I understood the true nature of the relationship, that we were laundering money for an international criminal organization, I was already implicated in dozens of transactions that would mean prison if discovered. Michael was Santoro's man from the beginning. I see that clearly now. He orchestrated my introduction to Santoro, guided me deeper into the operation with each new development project, ensured my complicity grew until extraction became impossible. I've made contingency plans for you, clean money and accounts the authorities won't connect to our criminal activities, enough for you to start over somewhere if necessary. The access information is with Eleanor in an envelope marked Contingency Trust. She doesn't know what it contains, only that it's to be delivered to you if circumstances warrant. Your cancer diagnosis has forced me to confront the man I've become. The distance between the ambitious but ethical attorney you married and the compromised, corrupted person writing this letter is vast and unbridgeable. I don't recognize myself anymore, and I fear you wouldn't either if you knew the truth. I thought about confessing everything when we received your diagnosis, about facing the consequences of my actions rather than continuing this elaborate deception. But cowardice prevailed, the same cowardice that now makes me pull away from you when you need me most. I tell myself I'm protecting you by maintaining distance. That knowledge of my activities would only add to your burden during treatment. The truth is, I can't bear to see your disappointment when you eventually discover what I've done, what I've become. So I withdraw, creating space that Amber now fills. Another deception, another escape from accountability. It's despicable, I know, unforgivable. If circumstances have forced this letter into your hands, know that my failures are mine alone. You deserved far better than the man I became. Always, Christopher Clare sat motionless, the letter trembling in her hands as tears blurred the carefully written words. This confession, penned months before her discovery of his betrayal, revealed a man trapped in a web partly of his own making, but constructed with Michael's deliberate manipulation. It didn't excuse his actions, the affair, the abandonment during her illness, but it provided context she had been missing, a timeline that shifted her understanding of events. Christopher had been compromised long before her diagnosis. His withdrawal, after her cancer news, driven partly by shame over his criminal entanglements, not merely by selfish avoidance of her illness. The realization didn't diminish her pain, but it complicated her narrative of their collapse. The villain of her story had himself been a victim of sorts, of Michael's manipulation, of Santoro's threats, of his own moral compromises that had spiraled beyond his control. Claire carefully refolded the letter, placing it in her pocket as she left the office. The house felt different now, the memories it contained altered by this new information. She moved through the rooms with fresh awareness, seeing beyond the perfect facade to the fragile foundation beneath. In the master bedroom, she opened the safe hidden behind their wedding portrait, a hiding place the FBI had discovered and emptied during their investigation. Yet something compelled her to reach inside, to run her fingers along the interior surfaces one final time. Her fingertips caught on something, a small irregularity in the safe's lining. Pressing gently, she felt a section give way, revealing another hidden compartment, much like the one in Christopher's desk. Inside lay a small velvet pouch. Claire withdrew it with trembling fingers, loosening the drawstring to reveal its contents, her grandmother's sapphire ring, a family heirloom she had believed lost during their move to the Bel Air house years earlier. A small note accompanied the ring, dated shortly after her diagnosis. For Claire, a reminder of the strength you come from, may it serve you better than I have. The discovery broke something in Claire's carefully maintained composure. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the ring clutched in her palm as sobs tore through her body. For the marriage that had disintegrated, for the trust that had been shattered, for the complex, flawed man who had betrayed her, yet sought in small, inadequate ways to protect her, even as he pulled away. Hours later, exhausted but somehow lighter, Claire made a decision. She reached for her phone and dialed Christopher's number. "Claire?" His voice reflected surprise and caution. "I found your letter," she said without preamble, "the one in your desk, and my grandmother's ring." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of his uneven breathing. "I wondered if you would," he finally said, "after everything fell apart. Why hide them there? Why not give me these truths directly?" "Cowardice," Christopher admitted. The same explanation he'd offered in the letter. "I couldn't bear to see your expression when you learned what I'd become. It was easier to leave explanations that might never be found." Claire closed her eyes, picturing him in the impersonal hotel suite, wounded both physically and emotionally, stripped of the empire he had built through both legitimate work and criminal compromise. "We need to talk," she said decisively. "Really talk. Not about the legal case or the financial settlements. About us. About what happened and what happens next." "Are you sure?" Christopher asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. "I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again." "I'm not sure of anything anymore," Claire confessed, "but I need closure one way or another. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. I'll have dinner prepared here." After ending the call, Claire felt a curious sense of purpose. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Whatever emerged from their conversation, she would face it with clear eyes and an open heart. The following evening arrived with unsettling swiftness. Claire had spent the day in careful preparation, not just of the meal, catered by Christopher's favorite Italian restaurant, but of herself. She had visited Dr. Patel for a treatment update, consulted with Eleanor about the latest developments in the federal case, and spent an hour in quiet meditation by the pool, gathering her strength for the emotional reckoning to come. When the doorbell rang precisely at 7, Claire felt an unexpected flutter of nerves. She smoothed the simple black dress she had chosen, taking a deep breath before opening the door. Christopher stood on the threshold, visibly thinner after his hospital stay, one arm still in a sling beneath his sport coat. In his good hand he held a small bouquet of white calla lilies, her favorite flowers. "These felt appropriate," he said, offering them tentatively. "New beginnings or proper endings," Claire finished for him, accepting the flowers. "Either way, they're beautiful, thank you." She led him through to the kitchen, where she had deliberately chosen to serve dinner at the informal breakfast table rather than in the formal dining room. This conversation required intimacy, not the distance of their usual entertaining space. Christopher's gaze traveled over the familiar kitchen, lingering on small details as if seeing them for the first time, or the last. "You've changed the coffee maker," he observed. "It broke last week," Claire explained, arranging the lilies in a crystal vase. "I replaced it with something simpler." The mundane exchange highlighted the strangeness of their situation. Estranged spouses discussing appliances while federal investigations and cancer treatments reshaped their lives. They settled at the table, the catered meals served on their everyday dishes rather than the formal china. For several minutes they ate in silence, the weight of unsaid words hanging between them. "How are you feeling?" Christopher finally asked, gesturing vaguely toward her. "The treatments." "Better than expected," Claire replied, grateful for the neutral opening. "Dr. Patel is cautiously optimistic. The tumors are shrinking and my blood work shows improvement." Relief washed over Christopher's features. "That's wonderful news, Claire. Truly." "And you?" she asked, nodding toward his injured shoulder. "The recovery?" "Slower than I'd like," he admitted. "Physical therapy 3 times weekly. The doctors say I'll regain about 80% function eventually." Another silence descended. The small talk exhausted, deeper matters awaiting address. "I've been thinking about your letter," Claire finally said, setting down her fork. "About the timeline you described. Michael's role in bringing Santoro into the company." Christopher nodded, his expression somber. "It was masterfully done. Michael identified our vulnerability after the Westlake failure and presented Santoro as our salvation. By the time I understood the true nature of the relationship, extraction seemed impossible." "Why didn't you come to me?" Claire asked, the question that had haunted her since reading his confession. "I was your wife, a partner in building everything we had. Did you think I wouldn't understand the pressure you were under?" Christopher's gaze dropped to his barely touched meal. At first I thought I was protecting you by keeping you uninvolved. Later, when I realized how deeply entangled we'd become with Santoro's organization, shame prevented me from confessing." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "The truth is, I couldn't bear to see my failure reflected in your eyes. So instead, you pulled away completely," Claire concluded. "Especially after my diagnosis." "The cancer was a breaking point," Christopher acknowledged. "Suddenly, mortality wasn't an abstract concept, but an immediate reality. I couldn't reconcile the man I'd become with the time we might have left together. Rather than face that dissonance, I ran to Amber, to the Cabo Project, to the fantasy of escaping everything I'd corrupted." The raw honesty in his voice startled Claire. Gone was the silver-tongued negotiator, the practiced charmer who had built a real estate empire. In his place sat a man stripped of pretense, facing the wreckage of his choices. "And now?" she asked softly. "What do you want now, Christopher?" He considered the question with visible care. Redemption seems too much to ask for. Forgiveness, equally unlikely. Perhaps just understanding. A recognition that while my choices were unforgivable, they came from complicated places. "And us? What do you want for us?" Christopher's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing resignation. "What I want doesn't matter, Claire. This conversation isn't about my desires, but about your needs." "What do you want?" The question caught her off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because she had been avoiding its answer even in the privacy of her own thoughts. "I don't know," she admitted, the simple truth freeing in its honesty. "For months, my focus narrowed to survival, fighting cancer, then unraveling your deceptions, then escaping Michael's betrayal. I haven't allowed myself to consider what comes after." Christopher nodded, acceptance in his eyes. "That's fair. You've been in crisis mode since your diagnosis, with each new revelation adding to the burden. Take whatever time you need." His understanding, so at odds with the selfish man who had abandoned her, awakened a confusing tangle of emotions in Claire's chest. "Why did you save me?" she asked abruptly, returning to the question that had haunted her since the mountain confrontation. "You could have escaped, started over with the clean money you'd hidden. Instead, you risked everything to protect me from Michael." Christopher's expression softened with something like tenderness, because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not survival, not freedom, not the future. Just ensuring that my greatest failure, abandoning you when you needed me most, didn't lead to your destruction. The simple truth of his answer broke through Claire's carefully maintained defenses. Tears welled in her eyes, escaping despite her efforts to contain them. "I hated you," she whispered, her voice ragged with emotion. "When I discovered Amber, the offshore accounts, your plans to leave, I hated you with an intensity that terrified me." "You had every right," Christopher acknowledged, pain evident in his features. "But then you saved me," Claire continued, struggling to articulate the complexity of her feelings. "You took a bullet meant for me. You sacrificed yourself for someone you had already betrayed. And now," she gestured helplessly, "now I don't know what to feel, what to think, how to reconcile these contradictory truths about who you are." Christopher reached across the table with his good hand, hesitating just short of touching her. "Maybe we don't need to reconcile them. Maybe complex, contradictory truths are all we get in this life. People who fail terribly, yet still contain the capacity for sacrifice. Relationships that shatter, yet leave lasting value." His words resonated with unexpected clarity. Claire found herself nodding slowly, recognizing wisdom in his perspective. "The future feels so uncertain," she confessed. "My prognosis, your legal situation, the aftermath of everything that's happened. I can't see a clear path forward." "Perhaps clarity is overrated," Christopher suggested gently. "Perhaps the path only reveals itself one step at a time." Claire studied him across the table. This man she had loved, hated, and now viewed through a lens of complicated understanding. "And what would the first step look like?" she asked. Christopher considered the question carefully. "Coffee," he finally said. "Not dinner with all its weight and expectation, just coffee somewhere neutral. Conversation without agenda, small steps toward whatever comes next." The simplicity of the suggestion brought an unexpected smile to Claire's lips. "Coffee," she repeated. "That sounds possible." A tentative hope flickered in Christopher's eyes. "You'll let me know when you're ready." "I will," Claire promised, realizing with surprise that she meant it. After dinner, she walked him to the door, their movements careful, respectful of newly established boundaries. At the threshold, Christopher turned to her, something unspoken in his expression. "Thank you," he said simply, "for tonight, for hearing me out, for considering any kind of future where I'm not completely excised from your life." Claire nodded, emotions too complex for easy expression welling within her. On impulse, she reached out, squeezing his good hand briefly. "Good night, Christopher." After he left, Claire moved through the quiet house, extinguishing lights, locking doors, routine actions that somehow felt different tonight. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Thank you for giving me more than I deserve. Sleep well." See, a small gesture, yet it touched something within her. A recognition that healing might begin with simple acknowledgements, with gratitude for small mercies rather than expectations of grand redemption. Claire slept deeply that night, more peacefully than she had in months. When she woke the following morning, sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows, she felt a subtle but definitive shift within herself. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps the first fragile roots of something new growing from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Her phone rang as she was preparing breakfast. "Eleanor." "Good morning," Claire greeted her. "You're calling early." "Important developments," Eleanor replied, her tone uncharacteristically urgent. "The FBI raided a property in San Diego last night. They found Victor Santoro." Claire's pulse quickened. "They arrested him?" "Not exactly," Eleanor said grimly. "He was dead. Apparent suicide, though the circumstances are suspicious. He left documents implicating several high-profile business leaders and politicians in his operation." The news landed with surprising weight. Santoro, the shadowy figure whose criminal enterprise had entangled Christopher and Michael, whose influence had indirectly shattered Claire's life, was gone. "There's more," Eleanor continued. "Michael Dawson has offered a comprehensive plea deal, full disclosure of the entire operation in exchange for witness protection. His testimony implicates Christopher in activities beyond what he's already admitted to federal prosecutors." Claire sank onto a kitchen stool, processing this new complication. "How bad?" "Potentially very bad," Eleanor confirmed. "If Michael's claims are substantiated, Christopher's current cooperation agreement could be invalidated. He could face significant prison time." "But Christopher has been cooperating fully," Claire protested. "The FBI confirms his information has been invaluable." "Yes, but Michael is alleging that Christopher has withheld key details about his role in the operation. Specifically, that he was not merely a frontman manipulated by others, but an active, knowing participant who helped design the money laundering structure." The contradiction between this allegation and Christopher's account of events, both in person and in his hidden letter, created a fresh wave of uncertainty. Had he been truthful about his limited role, his manipulation by Michael and Santoro, or was this yet another layer of deception? "What does Christopher say about Michael's allegations?" Claire asked, fighting to maintain her equilibrium amid this new challenge. "His attorney denies everything," Eleanor replied, "but the prosecutors are naturally skeptical. They're requesting a meeting with Christopher tomorrow to address the discrepancies." After ending the call, Claire stood motionless in her kitchen, the breakfast she had been preparing forgotten. Just when a path forward had begun to emerge, tentative coffee dates, careful conversations, the possibility of understanding if not reconciliation, the ground had shifted once again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. "Just heard from my attorney about Michael's allegations. I need to speak with you. These claims are false. A final betrayal from someone who's already taken so much from us both. Please call when you can." Claire stared at the message, uncertainty flooding back. Who was telling the truth? Christopher, who had already deceived her so profoundly, or Michael, who had orchestrated the entire criminal enterprise while posing as their loyal friend? The clarity she had felt upon waking dissolved, replaced by the familiar fog of doubt and suspicion. The fragile trust she had begun to rebuild with Christopher now balanced on a knife's edge, threatened by allegations that could either represent Michael's final act of manipulation or Christopher's continued deception. Coffee suddenly seemed inadequate, a naive response to a situation that remained more complicated, more perilous than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. Claire set her phone aside without responding to Christopher's message. Whatever truth emerged from tomorrow's meeting with federal prosecutors would shape their path forward. if indeed any path remained that didn't lead to Christopher's imprisonment and her own isolation. The false resolution of their dinner conversation, the tentative hope it had kindled, now revealed itself as premature. The real climax of their story had yet to unfold. The United States Attorney's Office for the Central District of California occupied several floors of a gleaming downtown Los Angeles federal building. Claire sat in a small conference room on the 10th floor, the city sprawling beneath leaden skies through floor-to-ceiling windows. Across from her, Eleanor reviewed documents with practiced efficiency, occasionally making notes in the margins. "Are you certain you want to be here for this?" Eleanor asked, glancing up from her papers. "Christopher's legal team is perfectly capable of handling these allegations without your presence." Claire smoothed the sleeve of her charcoal suit, armor she had chosen carefully for this confrontation. "I need to hear it for myself. All of it." Eleanor studied her with concern. "The prosecutors may not be gentle. They believe Christopher has been withholding information, despite his cooperation agreement." "I've faced worse recently," Claire replied with quiet certainty. The door opened, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez entered, flanked by 2 FBI agents, Agent Delgado, whom Claire recognized from the mountain operation, and a male agent she hadn't met. "Mrs. Carter," Martinez greeted her, professional but not unkind. "Thank you for coming, though I should clarify that this meeting is primarily with your husband and his legal counsel." "I understand," Claire replied. "I'm here as an observer, nothing more." Martinez nodded, setting down a thick folder of documents. "Mr. Carter and his attorney should arrive momentarily. In the meantime, may I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you," Claire declined, maintaining her composure despite the tension coiling in her stomach. The door opened again to admit Christopher and his attorney, Lawrence Goldstein, a veteran defense lawyer known for handling high-profile white-collar cases. Christopher's appearance shocked Claire slightly. In the 2 days since their dinner, he seemed to have aged visibly, dark circles beneath his eyes, his normally impeccable appearance showing subtle signs of neglect. His gaze found Claire immediately, surprise and something like gratitude flickering across his features. He hadn't known she would attend. "Mrs. Carter," he acknowledged with a formal nod, respecting the professional context despite their personal history. "Mr. Carter," she returned evenly. Goldstein frowned slightly at Claire's presence but made no comment as everyone took their seats around the conference table. Martinez opened the meeting without preamble. "Mr. Carter, we've asked for this meeting to address serious discrepancies between your statements to federal investigators and new information provided by Michael Dawson." Goldstein leaned forward. "Before we proceed, I'd like to reiterate that my client has cooperated fully with your investigation at considerable personal risk. The operation that apprehended Mr. Dawson and disrupted the Santoro organization would not have been possible without Mr. Carter's assistance." "Acknowledged," Martinez replied, unmoved. "However, cooperation agreements require complete truthfulness. We have reason to believe Mr. Carter has been selectively forthcoming." She nodded to Agent Delgado, who opened a laptop and turned it to face the group. "This is security footage from the private terminal at Van Nuys Airport, dated September 12th of last year. The video showed Christopher meeting with Victor Santoro and 2 other men Claire didn't recognize. They appeared to be reviewing documents, Christopher pointing to specific pages, explaining something with animated gestures. "According to your statements," Martinez continued, "you claimed your role was primarily as a front man, providing legitimate cover for Santoro's investments, but not actively structuring the money laundering operation. This footage suggests otherwise." Christopher exchanged glances with Goldstein, who nodded slightly. "The meeting shown in that video concerned the structural design of the Cabo property development," Christopher explained. "I was actively involved in the real estate aspects of the project, building specifications, amenity planning, marketing strategy." "And these documents?" Martinez pressed, advancing the video to a clearer frame showing papers spread across a table. Christopher hesitated. "Property schematics and floor plans, investor prospectuses." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Dawson tells a different story. He claims these were diagrams of the financial structure, specifically the system for moving cash through the development and back into seemingly legitimate channels. A system you personally designed." Claire felt her heart sink as she watched Christopher's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. Was this another deception? Had his apparent redemption been yet another performance? Michael Dawson is fighting for his life, Goldstein interjected smoothly. He has every incentive to shift as much culpability as possible onto my client. Perhaps, Martinez acknowledged, but Mr. Dawson provided specific details that we've been able to verify independently. She slid a document across the table. This diagram matches financial transactions we've traced through the Cayman Islands, Panama, and ultimately back to Santoro-controlled entities. It bears striking similarities to sketches found in your home office, Mr. Carter. Christopher's gaze dropped to the document, his good hand tensing visibly on the table. Claire studied his profile, searching for signs of deception or genuine surprise. His expression remained carefully controlled, but a muscle twitched along his jaw, a tell she had learned to recognize during their marriage when he felt cornered. "I need a moment with my client," Goldstein requested. Martinez nodded. 5 minutes. As the federal team stepped outside, Goldstein immediately leaned in to confer with Christopher in hushed, urgent tones. Claire and Eleanor remained seated, technically part of neither legal team, but unwilling to leave. "They have more than they're showing," Goldstein warned Christopher. "Dawson has given them a roadmap. If you continue denying direct involvement in the financial structure, they'll void your cooperation agreement entirely." Christopher ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Michael is manipulating events again, even from custody. He's trying to ensure I go down with him." His gaze shifted to Claire, conflicted emotions playing across his features. "I need to speak with my wife privately." Goldstein frowned. "This isn't the time for—" "Please," Christopher interrupted. "Just 2 minutes." Goldstein sighed but acquiesced, joining Eleanor at the far end of the conference room, giving them a semblance of privacy. Christopher turned to Claire, his voice low and urgent. "I didn't tell you everything at dinner, not because I was still hiding the truth, but because I was afraid it would destroy whatever fragile trust we were rebuilding." Claire studied him, her expression carefully neutral. "Tell me now." "The financial structure they're referring to. Yes, I helped design it," he admitted, the words emerging with visible difficulty. "Not initially, not when Santoro first approached us, but later, when I was already compromised, already implicated in earlier transactions. I became valuable to the operation beyond just providing a legitimate face." "So you lied," Claire concluded, disappointment washing through her. "Again." "Not entirely," Christopher countered. "The broad strokes were true. Michael was Santoro's man from the beginning. I was drawn in incrementally, manipulated into deeper involvement. But yes, I minimized my role once I was fully ensnared." He leaned closer, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I was trying to protect whatever chance we might have at something, some kind of future. I thought if you knew everything, I'd walk away completely," Claire finished for him. Christopher nodded, shame evident in his expression. "It was selfish, another mistake in a long series of them." Claire absorbed this latest revelation, her emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. "What will happen now? If you admit to this greater involvement, my cooperation agreement will be modified," Christopher explained grimly. "Likely more charges, definitely prison time. The question is how much. And if you continue to deny it, they'll tear up the agreement entirely. Maximum charges, decades behind bars instead of years." His voice tightened. "Claire, I'm going to prison either way. The only question is whether I'll have any life left when I get out." The door opened as Martinez and her team returned, ending their private conversation. Claire found herself studying the federal prosecutor with new intensity. This woman held Christopher's fate in her hands, the power to determine whether his redemption would be measured in years or decades. "Have you and your client reached any conclusions, Mr. Goldstein?" Martinez asked, resuming her seat. Goldstein glanced at Christopher, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "My client wishes to amend his previous statements regarding his role in the Santoro operation." Martinez's expression remained carefully neutral as she gestured for Christopher to continue. "I did help design aspects of the financial structure," Christopher admitted, his voice steady despite the gravity of the confession. "Not from the beginning, but after I was already compromised through earlier transactions. Santoro and Michael recognized my skills in creating complex, multi-layered business entities and leveraged that expertise." Claire watched as Christopher methodically outlined his deeper involvement in the money laundering operation, specific structures he had created, methods for disguising the origin of funds, strategies for reintegrating laundered money into legitimate business operations. The technical details washed over her. Less important than the fundamental truth, Christopher had been more culpable than he had initially admitted, both to federal authorities and to her. Martinez listened without interruption, occasionally nodding to Agent Delgado, who made notes on her laptop. When Christopher finished, Martinez leaned back in her chair, studying him thoughtfully. "That's considerably more consistent with Mr. Dawson's account," she observed. "Why the partial disclosure initially? You must have known we'd eventually discover the full extent of your involvement." "I was trying to salvage what I could," Christopher admitted. "My reputation, my future prospects, my relationship with my wife. It was another miscalculation." "A significant one," Martinez noted. "Your cooperation agreement specifically required complete truthfulness," Goldstein interjected smoothly, "which my client is now providing." Recognizing the error in his earlier approach, the value of his cooperation remains substantial. The Santoro operation has been effectively dismantled, key players apprehended, and millions in illicit funds frozen. "True," Martinez acknowledged. "However, the terms of our agreement must be renegotiated in light of these new disclosures." The conversation shifted to legal specifics, potential charges, sentencing guidelines, modifications to Christopher's cooperation agreement. Claire listened with mounting anxiety as years of Christopher's life were negotiated across the conference table, his future parceled out in legal terminology and federal sentencing protocols. "Given your amended statement and continued cooperation," Martinez finally concluded, "we're prepared to recommend a sentence of 5 to 7 years for the most serious charges, with the possibility of reduction for ongoing assistance in related prosecutions." 5 to 7 years. The numbers hung in the air like a verdict. Not the decades he might have faced without cooperation, but still a significant portion of life, particularly for a man in his mid-40s, particularly with Claire's uncertain health prognosis. "We'll need time to review the modified agreement," Goldstein replied, "but preliminary terms appear workable." Martinez nodded, gathering her documents. "We'll have the paperwork prepared by tomorrow morning. Mr. Carter will need to appear before Judge Hernandez next week for formal plea entry." As the meeting concluded, Claire remained seated, processing the implications of what she had witnessed. Christopher would go to prison, not a theoretical possibility, but an impending reality. The man who had betrayed her, then saved her life, would pay for his crimes in years that could have been theirs together, had different choices been made. Outside the federal building, rain had begun to fall, darkening the Los Angeles streets. Claire stood beneath the covered entrance, watching water stream down the glass facade, creating distorted reflections of the city beyond. "Thank you for being there," Christopher said quietly, joining her with Goldstein a few steps behind. "You didn't have to come. I needed to hear the truth," Claire replied. "All of it, finally." Christopher nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And now that you have?" Claire met his gaze directly. "I don't know yet. 5 to 7 years is a long time to process everything that's happened." "It is," he agreed. "Too long to ask you to wait, to put your life on hold, especially with your health situation still uncertain." Goldstein approached, keeping a respectful distance. "I need to discuss next steps with you, Christopher, when you're ready." "Of course," Christopher nodded. "Just a minute more." As Goldstein retreated to give them privacy, Christopher turned back to Claire, rain misting around them at the edge of the covered entrance. "Our coffee date will have to wait, it seems." A small, sad smile touched Claire's lips at the reference to their tentative plans from dinner. "Apparently," Christopher hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small envelope. "I was going to give you this at our next meeting. Now seems more appropriate." Claire accepted the envelope cautiously. "What is this?" "Information about the contingency trust I mentioned in my letter," Christopher explained. "Entirely clean assets, established before any involvement with Santoro, with no connection to Carter Properties. Enough to ensure your financial security regardless of what happens with the federal case or your medical treatments." Claire stared at the envelope, emotions conflicting within her. "I don't know if I can accept this." "It's not a gift," Christopher clarified gently. "It's your money too, derived from legitimate projects we built together in the early years, investments that succeeded through your legal expertise as much as my development skills. I've simply ensured it remains untouchable by federal asset seizures. Before Claire could respond, Goldstein approached again, his expression apologetic but insistent. "Christopher, we really need to prepare for tomorrow's agreement signing." Christopher nodded, turning back to Claire with unspoken questions in his eyes. "Will you—" he began, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to frame what he wanted to ask. "I don't know," Claire answered honestly, intuiting his question about their future contact. "I need time to process everything, to decide what this all means for me, for us." Understanding and resignation mingled in Christopher's expression. "Of course." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever you decide, Claire, know that saving your life was the one thing I got right in all of this. Whatever happens next, I'll never regret that." As Christopher walked away with Goldstein, disappearing into the rain toward a waiting car, Claire remained beneath the sheltered entrance, the envelope heavy in her hand. The weight of decisions pressed upon her, about the trust fund, about her relationship with Christopher, about what forgiveness might look like in the wake of such profound betrayal and equally profound sacrifice. Later that evening, as Claire sat in her oncologist's office awaiting results from her latest scans, the events of the day continued to replay in her mind. Dr. Patel entered with characteristic brisk efficiency, tablet in hand, her expression giving nothing away. "How are you feeling, Claire?" she asked, settling into her chair. "Physically or emotionally?" Claire replied with a tired smile. "Both, I suppose," Dr. Patel acknowledged, "though my primary concern is your physical response to the immunotherapy protocol." Claire considered the question honestly. The side effects remain challenging: fatigue, joint pain, occasional fever, but they seem less severe than during the initial treatments. Dr. Patel nodded, reviewing data on her tablet. "That's consistent with what we're seeing in your blood work. Your body is adapting to the treatment while still mounting the immune response we want to see." She turned the tablet toward Claire, displaying comparative imaging scans. "These are your initial scans from before treatment began," she explained, indicating the left images. "And these are from yesterday." Even to Claire's untrained eye, the difference was striking. The bright areas indicating tumor activity had diminished significantly, some disappearing entirely. "This is good?" Claire asked cautiously, afraid to presume too much from what she was seeing. Dr. Patel's professional reserve softened into a genuine smile. "This is exceptional, Claire. Better than we typically see at this stage of treatment. The primary tumors have reduced by approximately 68%, and several smaller metastases have disappeared completely." Relief washed through Claire, so powerful she felt momentarily lightheaded. "So the treatment is working." "Very effectively," Dr. Patel confirmed. "I don't use the word remission lightly, but if these trends continue through the next cycle of treatment, we may be approaching that territory." Remission. The word hung in the air like an unexpected gift, a possibility Claire had forced herself not to contemplate too seriously. Now it shimmered before her, tentative but tangible. "What happens next?" she asked, her mind already racing ahead to practical considerations. "We continue the protocol for at least 2 more cycles," Dr. Patel explained. "Then reassess based on response. The goal is complete remission, but even partial remission with this level of response represents a significant victory." As Claire left the medical center, evening had fallen over Los Angeles, the city transformed by rainfall into a landscape of reflective surfaces and blurred lights. She sat in her car in the parking garage, overwhelmed by the day's contrasting revelations. Christopher's deeper culpability and impending imprisonment set against her own improving health prospects. The juxtaposition felt cruelly ironic. As her physical prognosis improved, the possibility of any shared future with Christopher diminished. Not because of death, as they had once feared, but because of consequences finally catching up to long-standing deceptions. Claire drove aimlessly through rain-slicked streets, her thoughts churning. At a red light, she found herself opening the envelope Christopher had given her. Inside was a letter outlining the trust he had established, financial details, account access information, legal protections ensuring the assets remained beyond the reach of federal seizures or criminal penalties. The amount staggered her, far more than she had imagined, enough to ensure complete security regardless of medical costs or future uncertainties. Christopher had quietly transferred these assets years earlier, it appeared. Not recently as his legal troubles mounted, but systematically over time, creating a safety net she hadn't known existed. At the bottom of the document, a handwritten note in Christopher's distinctive script. This doesn't begin to repay what I've taken from you. Trust, security, peace of mind. But perhaps it offers freedom to choose your path forward without financial concerns complicating already difficult decisions. No manipulation, no plea for forgiveness or reconciliation, just practical support offered without expectations. The gesture touched something deep within Claire, a recognition of the complex man behind the betrayals and deceptions. On impulse, she dialed Eleanor's number. "I just left Dr. Patel's office," Claire said when her attorney answered. "The treatment is working, Eleanor. Better than expected." "Claire, that's wonderful news," Eleanor replied, genuine warmth in her voice. "I'm so pleased to hear it." "I need your help with something," Claire continued. "A trust Christopher has established. I need to understand its legal status, ensure it's truly protected from any federal action." Eleanor's tone shifted to professional caution. "I can examine the documentation, certainly. But Claire, accepting assets potentially connected to criminal activity, they're not," Claire interrupted. "At least according to Christopher, established years ago from legitimate projects before Santoro entered the picture. But I need verification." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "We can have our forensic accountants trace everything to be certain. When can you bring me the documents?" "Tomorrow morning," Claire decided. "But there's something else I need your help with as well. Something more personal." The following day dawned clear after the rainstorm. Los Angeles washed clean beneath a crystalline blue sky. Claire drove to the federal detention center, where Christopher was being held, pending his formal plea agreement, her hands steady on the steering wheel despite the emotional turmoil within. The visitor processing moved with bureaucratic slowness, identity verification, security screening, a series of locked doors opening and closing with metallic finality. Eventually, Claire was led to a small room divided by a transparent barrier, chairs positioned on either side. Christopher entered from the opposite door, wearing standard-issue detention center clothing that hung loosely on his frame. Surprise registered on his face when he saw her, followed by cautious hope as he settled into the chair across from her. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice slightly distorted through the intercom system. "I didn't expect to come," Claire admitted, "but I received news yesterday that changed my perspective." Christopher leaned forward, concern immediately apparent. "Your treatment? Has something happened?" "Yes," Claire confirmed, a small smile touching her lips. "Something good, actually. The immunotherapy is working better than expected. Dr. Patel used the word remission as a possible outcome if current trends continue." Relief and joy transformed Christopher's tired features. "Claire, that's incredible news. I'm so happy for you, so grateful." "It's made me think about the future," she continued. "A future I wasn't certain I'd have until recently." Christopher nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You have your whole life ahead of you again, a second chance." "We both do," Claire said quietly, "in different ways." Christopher's expression shifted to confusion. "I'm facing at least 5 years in federal prison, Claire. That's not much of a second chance." "It's not death," she pointed out. "It's not the end, just a detour." Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly tempered by caution. "What are you saying exactly?" Claire took a deep breath, organizing thoughts she had wrestled with throughout the sleepless night. "I've been thinking about forgiveness, not as a gift I give you, but as a process that might free me from the weight of anger and betrayal I've been carrying." Christopher listened intently, offering no defense or interruption. "I don't know what form that forgiveness might ultimately take," Claire continued honestly, "or what kind of relationship might be possible after everything that's happened, but I've decided to remain open to the possibility of something. Some connection that honors both what we lost and what might still exist between us." "Even with the years of separation ahead?" Christopher asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. 5 years is a long time," Claire acknowledged. "But it's not forever, and time has taken on new meaning for me since my diagnosis. More precious, certainly, but also more fluid. What matters is how we use it, not just how much we have." Christopher's eyes glistened with moisture he made no attempt to hide. "I don't deserve this consideration, Claire, this generosity of spirit." "Probably not," she agreed with the ghost of a smile. "But life rarely gives us exactly what we deserve, good or bad. Sometimes it offers unexpected possibilities instead." She reached into her purse, withdrawing a folder. "I've had Eleanor examine the trust documentation. Everything appears legitimate. Clean money from verifiable sources, properly established years before any criminal activity. I've decided to accept it, with one modification. Christopher raised an eyebrow in question. "I'm establishing a foundation," Claire explained, "for families affected by white-collar crime and money laundering operations, people who lose jobs, homes, investments when these schemes collapse. A significant portion of the trust will fund their support, legal assistance, financial counseling, practical resources." A slow smile spread across Christopher's features. "Transforming my mistakes into something constructive. It's perfect, Claire. The remainder will secure my medical care and basic needs," she continued, "with enough remaining to help me pursue whatever comes next, perhaps returning to legal practice, though in a different capacity than before. You always were the better attorney between us," Christopher observed, pride evident beneath the humor. Claire smiled in acknowledgement. "I've also arranged to maintain connection during your incarceration, if you want that. Letters, visits when possible. Not promises of what might come after, but openness to the possibility of evolution." Christopher pressed his palm against the transparent barrier separating them. "I want that very much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The chance to know you again, without deception between us. To see who we might become through all of this." Claire placed her hand against the barrier opposite his, not touching, separated by institutional boundaries, yet connected nonetheless. "One day at a time," she said softly. "That's all either of us can promise right now." "One day at a time," Christopher repeated, the simple phrase becoming something like a covenant between them. As Claire left the detention center, stepping into the sunlight of a Los Angeles morning, she felt a curious lightness, not the absence of grief or pain, but their transformation into something more complex. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges she could only partially anticipate. Her ongoing cancer treatment, Christopher's imprisonment, the long process of rebuilding trust that might never fully restore what had been broken. Yet possibility existed within that uncertainty, the possibility of healing, of growth, of connections that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. Claire had entered this crisis as one person and would emerge as another, stronger in broken places, wiser through painful lessons, more compassionate through suffering. Whatever came next would unfold in its own time. For today, the simple fact of continued existence, hers, Christopher's, the complex bond between them, seemed miracle enough to acknowledge with gratitude. Claire drove toward the beach, drawn to the ocean's vastness as a reminder of perspective. Standing at the shoreline, waves washing over her bare feet, she breathed deeply of salt air and possibility. The water stretched toward the horizon, boundless and ever-changing, much like the future now opening before her, marked by pain, certainly, but no longer defined by it. Pulling out her phone, she typed a brief message to Christopher, who would receive it when processing aloud. "The ocean reminds me that nothing stays the same forever. Tides change, storms pass. What matters is remaining open to whatever washes up on shore next." Slipping the phone back into her pocket, Claire walked along the water's edge, her footprints disappearing behind her with each successive wave, not erasing her path, but transforming it into something new with each passing moment. 5 years passed with the inevitability of seasons changing, each month marked on Claire's calendar with a small red X, counting down, moving forward, measuring the distance between separation and reunion. The morning of Christopher's release dawned with a crystalline clarity unique to Southern California winters, the air sharp and clean, the sky an impossible blue stretching from the mountains to the Pacific. Claire stood in the kitchen of her Venice Beach bungalow, watching sunlight dance across the polished concrete countertops as she prepared coffee with methodical precision, a ritual that had become a cornerstone of her reconstructed life. 5 years. So much had happened in that time, both within and beyond the boundaries of her existence. The world had continued its relentless evolution. Presidents elected and defeated, technological leaps, cultural shifts, global crises weathered. And Claire's own life had undergone transformations equally profound, though more personal in scale. Her cancer had entered full remission 3.5 years earlier, after 18 months of aggressive immunotherapy treatments. Dr. Patel had delivered the news with uncharacteristic emotion, embracing Claire in the sterile examination room where they had weathered so many difficult conversations. "We don't use the word cured with your type of cancer," Dr. Patel had cautioned. "But 5 years without recurrence approaches functional cure territory. Claire still attended biannual checkups, still held her breath slightly when awaiting scan results, but the acute terror of mortality had receded to a more philosophical awareness, the understanding that life remained uncertain for everyone, cancer survivor or not. The Carter Properties scandal had faded from headlines, supplanted by fresher controversies and newer falls from grace. Michael Dawson remained in federal witness protection, his testimony having secured convictions against several key members of Santoro's organization. Claire occasionally wondered where he might be living, what identity he might have assumed, whether remorse ever visited him in quiet moments. The settlement of Christopher's legal affairs had ultimately been more complex than initially outlined in that pivotal meeting with federal prosecutors. His cooperation had proven even more valuable than anticipated, leading to additional arrests and asset seizures that extended beyond Santoro's immediate circle into other criminal enterprises. In recognition of this exceptional assistance, his sentence had been reduced to 48 months, with the final year served in a minimum security facility that allowed greater contact with the outside world, more frequent visits, telephone privileges, even limited email communication. Claire had maintained connection throughout his incarceration, their relationship evolving through carefully written letters, monitored phone calls, and monthly visits that gradually transformed awkwardness into a new kind of understanding. Not the effortless companionship of their early marriage, but something more conscious, more deliberately constructed on foundations of painful honesty. Their communication had initially focused on practical matters, the dissolution of Carter Properties' remaining legitimate assets, Claire's health updates, Christopher's adaptation to prison life. Gradually, it had expanded to include deeper reflections, philosophical discussions about redemption, purpose, the meaning extracted from suffering. Christopher had changed profoundly during his incarceration. The polished corporate persona had been stripped away, revealing something more authentic beneath, sometimes vulnerable, occasionally bitter, but increasingly thoughtful as he reckoned with the consequences of his choices. He had begun mentoring younger inmates, particularly those convicted of financial crimes, helping them understand the ripple effects of their actions beyond immediate victims. Eventually, this informal guidance evolved into an official role with a prison education program, teaching business ethics and financial literacy with the unique perspective of someone who had violated both. Claire's own evolution had been equally significant. After recovering from her treatments, she had redirected her legal expertise toward the foundation she had established, the Carter Justice Project, which provided support to families affected by white-collar crime. What began as a personal mission of redemption had grown into a nationally recognized organization, with satellite offices in New York, Chicago, and Miami. The irony wasn't lost on her. The wealth that had once represented their perfect life, built partly on deception, now funded work that brought genuine healing to others harmed by similar deceptions. Transformation, not merely restoration, had become her guiding principle. Claire's phone chimed with a text message from Eleanor. "Everything set for today. Call if you need anything. Proud of you, my friend." A smile touched Claire's lips as she replied with quick thanks. Eleanor had been a constant through these years of rebuilding, offering legal guidance, yes, but also the steady friendship that had sustained Claire through her darkest moments. Now in her 70s, Eleanor had officially retired from Westwood Blackwell, but remained actively involved in the Carter Justice Project as board chairperson. Claire glanced at the kitchen clock, 9:17 a.m. Christopher would be released at noon. 3 hours remaining in a separation that had stretched across 5 years, yet somehow those final hours felt more significant than the years preceding them. What would he be like now? How would the reality of Christopher compare to the person she had come to know through letters and brief visits? And what shape would their relationship take once institutional barriers no longer defined its boundaries? These questions had occupied Claire's thoughts with increasing frequency as the release date approached. They had never discussed specific expectations for after, a deliberate choice that honored the complexity of their situation. Neither had made promises or demands. They had simply agreed to meet on this day, at this threshold between past and future, and see what might emerge. Claire finished her coffee and moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency: shower, dress, final review of emails related to ongoing foundation projects, purposeful activity to channel the nervous energy coursing through her veins. At 10:30, she gathered the items she had carefully selected for today: Christopher's favorite cashmere sweater, navy blue purchased last month, comfortable jeans in what she hoped was still his size, Italian leather loafers, a quilted jacket for the winter chill, the watch she had given him on their 15th anniversary, one of the few personal possessions returned to her after his sentencing. She placed these in a simple duffel bag, alongside toiletries and other essentials he might need immediately. Not his old belongings from their shared life, those remained in storage, but new things, symbolic of new beginnings. The drive to the Federal Correctional Institution at Lompoc took just under 2 hours, carrying Claire north along the coast, past Santa Barbara, into the rolling landscape of Central California's wine country. She had made this journey monthly for years, but today the familiar route felt charged with different significance. The prison facility appeared on the horizon, a complex of low buildings surrounded by chain link and concertina wire, institutional yet lacking the fortress-like appearance of higher security prisons. Claire parked in the visitors' lot, now directed to a different area designated for inmate releases. A small gathering of people waited near the administrative building, other families anticipating reunions, their expressions reflecting combinations of anxiety, excitement, uncertainty. Claire recognized a few faces from shared waiting room experiences over the years, exchanging nods of recognition, but maintaining the respectful distance that had characterized these interactions. At precisely noon, a door opened, and the first released inmate emerged, a young man who rushed into the embraces of an older couple, presumably parents. Others followed at intervals, each exit punctuated by emotional greetings or the quieter dignity of those facing freedom alone. Christopher appeared at 12:28, pausing briefly in the doorway, squinting slightly in the unfiltered sunlight. He wore standard release clothing, khaki pants and a pale blue button-down shirt that hung loosely on his frame. He carried a small box containing what must be his authorized personal effects. He scanned the waiting area, his gaze finally settling on Claire. For a moment he simply stood there, as if absorbing the reality of this transition, from incarceration to freedom, from institutional control to personal choice, from theoretical reunion to actual presence. Claire remained rooted in her spot, allowing him this moment of adjustment, respecting the significance of these first steps into reclaimed liberty. Their eyes held across the distance, a lifetime of shared history passing between them. The young lawyers who had fallen in love at Stanford, the power couple who had built an empire, the estranged spouses who had weathered betrayal, the complicated individuals who had maintained connection through extraordinary circumstances. Christopher moved toward her finally, his gait slightly hesitant, his expression a complex mixture of emotions too intertwined to separate. "Claire," he said simply when he reached her, her name containing everything else left unspoken. "Welcome back," she replied, her voice steadier than she had anticipated. They regarded each other with careful attention, cataloging changes time had etched upon familiar features. Christopher's hair had grayed considerably, the salt and pepper now predominantly salt, especially at the temples. Lines had deepened around his eyes and mouth, and his previously athletic frame had grown leaner, more angular, yet his eyes remained the same intense blue, now holding a depth of experience that had been absent in their previous life. "How you look well," he observed, his gaze taking in her healthy color, the glossy chestnut hair now styled in a shorter cut that framed her face elegantly. "More than well, radiant, clean living," Claire responded with a small smile. "And excellent oncologists." A shadow of old pain crossed Christopher's features at the reference to her illness. "Still in remission?" "Complete remission," Claire confirmed. 4 years and counting. "Doctor, Patel has officially downgraded my status from patient to miracle." Relief softened Christopher's expression. "That is a miracle I've thanked God for every day, even when I wasn't sure he was listening." The mention of faith, something absent from their previous shared life, registered with Claire as one of many changes she would come to understand about this new version of Christopher. "I brought you some clothes," she said, gesturing to the duffel bag. "If you'd like to change before we leave." Christopher glanced down at his institutional attire. "I'd appreciate that very much." Claire directed him to restrooms near the visitors' center, waiting outside while he changed. When he emerged minutes later in the clothes she had selected, the transformation was subtle but significant. Still Christopher, but now visibly a citizen rather than an inmate. "Perfect fit," he commented, genuine gratitude in his voice. "You always did know my size." "Though I've lost weight," "We can address that," Claire replied. "I've made lunch reservations at a place near Santa Barbara if you're hungry." "Starving," Christopher admitted, "for real food among other things." They walked to her car in companionable silence, maintaining a respectful physical distance despite the complex intimacy of their situation. As Claire drove away from the facility, she noticed Christopher watching the prison recede in the side mirror, his expression unreadable. "Strange feeling?" she asked. "Surreal," he confirmed. "For years my entire existence was contained within those fences. Now," he gestured toward the open landscape surrounding them, winter sunlight gilding the undulating hills. "Freedom feels almost disorienting." "It will take time to adjust," Claire acknowledged. "There's no need to rush anything." Christopher turned from the window to study her profile as she drove. "How are you, Claire?" "Really?" Beyond the medical updates and foundation news you shared in your letters, she considered the question with the thoughtfulness it deserved. "I'm at peace, in ways I wasn't before. More purposeful, less concerned with appearances, more focused on substance." She glanced at him briefly. "Cancer and betrayal make excellent teachers, it turns out." "Harsh but effective," Christopher agreed quietly. "I'm sorry it took both to bring clarity." "Don't apologize today," Claire said firmly. "We've covered that ground thoroughly in letters and visits. Today is about moving forward, not looking back." Christopher nodded, accepting this boundary. "Tell me about the foundation then. Your last update mentioned expansion plans." Claire welcomed the shift to safer territory, describing recent developments with the Carter Justice Project, a new initiative focusing specifically on elderly victims of financial fraud, partnerships with law schools to train attorneys in specialized victim advocacy, a documentary series highlighting personal stories of recovery after financial devastation. Christopher listened attentively, asking insightful questions that reflected genuine interest and the business acumen that had once built their empire. By the time they reached the restaurant, a small, elegant establishment overlooking the Pacific, conversation flowed more naturally, the initial awkwardness partially dissolved. Over lunch, they continued discussing the foundation, gradually expanding to include Christopher's experiences teaching in the prison education program. He described the impact of helping younger inmates understand the human consequences of financial crimes, the satisfaction of witnessing genuine remorse evolve into commitment to different choices. "I've been thinking about how to continue that work outside," he explained, careful enthusiasm in his voice. "Obviously, my background limits traditional employment options, but there are organizations working with former inmates that might welcome my perspective." "The foundation could potentially support such initiatives," Claire offered. "We've been considering programs specifically for rehabilitation and reintegration of white-collar offenders." Christopher's expression brightened with interest, then clouded slightly. "Would that create complications? My direct involvement with your organization?" "It would require careful consideration," Claire acknowledged. "But the Foundation's mission has always been about transformation, helping victims rebuild, yes, but also addressing root causes of financial crime. Your experience could be valuable, properly structured." They explored this possibility further, the conversation taking on the qualities of their best professional collaborations from the past, complementary perspectives, mutual respect for expertise, shared commitment to meaningful outcomes. Yet beneath this practical discussion ran currents of deeper significance, the tentative reconstruction of partnership, purpose emerging from painful history. After lunch, Claire suggested a walk along the nearby beach. They removed their shoes, padding across cool sand as winter sunlight cast long shadows across the shoreline. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries punctuating the rhythmic wash of waves against the shore. "I've missed this," Christopher said, gesturing toward the ocean. "Open spaces, natural beauty not confined by fences or schedules. The simplest freedoms become the most precious when lost," Claire observed. Christopher nodded, slowing his pace to watch a sandpiper darting along the water's edge. "I've had ample time to consider what matters most, what I would do differently given another chance." "And what conclusions did you reach?" Claire asked, genuinely curious about his reflections after 5 years of confinement and contemplation. Christopher considered his response carefully. "That success means nothing without integrity, that no achievement justifies compromising essential values, that relationships matter more than accomplishments." He glanced at her. "Things you understood intuitively, but I had to learn through catastrophic failure." Everyone's path to wisdom differs, Claire said. Mine came through illness and betrayal, yours through consequences and confinement. The important thing is that we both arrived somewhere more authentic than where we began. They walked in silence for several minutes, adjusting to this new honesty between them. Neither the performative perfection of their previous marriage, nor the institutional constraints of prison visits, but something more genuine, more carefully considered. "Where do we go from here, Claire?" Christopher finally asked, giving voice to the question that hovered between them. "I've been careful not to presume anything about our future, not to burden you with expectations during my incarceration. But now that I'm free," Claire had anticipated this question, had rehearsed various responses, yet found herself setting aside prepared answers in favor of spontaneous truth. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "I know that I've valued our reconnection through letters and visits. I know that the man you've become through this ordeal is someone I respect and care for deeply. But I also know that rebuilding a life together, if that's even what we both want, would require careful navigation of complex histories." "One day at a time," Christopher suggested, echoing the phrase that had become something of a mantra during his incarceration. "One day at a time," Claire agreed with a small smile, "beginning with practical matters. You'll need a place to stay, to re-establish yourself professionally, to fulfill the terms of your probation. I've arranged temporary housing through a reintegration program," Christopher explained, "and my probation officer has approved my initial employment with a non-profit that helps former inmates develop business skills. Nothing glamorous, but it's a start." Claire nodded, impressed by his foresight and humble acceptance of drastically changed circumstances. The Christopher she had married would have considered such arrangements beneath him. This new version appeared genuinely grateful for the opportunity. "The Foundation's guest cottage is also available," she offered tentatively, "on Venice Beach, close enough for convenient communication about potential collaboration, far enough for appropriate boundaries while we figure things out." Surprise and gratitude flickered across Christopher's features. "You'd be comfortable with that arrangement? With me living on your property? The cottage has its own entrance, its own address. Complete privacy," Claire clarified. "But yes, I'm comfortable with it. Encouraged even by the possibility of getting to know each other again without institutional constraints." Christopher absorbed this offer, visibly moved by its implications. "I'd like that very much," he said simply. "Thank you." As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the Pacific, they returned to the car, continuing their journey south toward Los Angeles. Conversation flowed more naturally now, touching on changes in the city during Christopher's absence, mutual acquaintances whose lives had evolved in various ways, cultural developments that had filtered in completely through prison barriers. They arrived at Claire's Venice Beach property as dusk settled, the modern main house illuminated against deepening twilight. The guest cottage stood at the rear of the property, a renovated carriage house with its own small garden, path leading to a separate street entrance. "It's beautiful," Christopher said as Claire showed him through the cottage. A simple but elegant space with modern furnishings, well-stocked kitchen, bedroom overlooking a small private patio. "More than I deserve." "Deserving has never been a particularly useful concept in our story," Claire observed. "None of us gets exactly what we deserve, good or bad. We get opportunities, and we choose what to make of them." Christopher nodded, absorbing this perspective. "A much healthier framework than my old system of entitlement and acquisition." Claire smiled at his self-awareness. "The refrigerator is stocked with basics. Anything else you need? Just let me know. I've left my contact information on the counter, along with Wi-Fi access and other practical details." "Thank you," Christopher said, his gaze holding hers with genuine gratitude that extended beyond these immediate provisions to encompass all she had done to maintain connection during his incarceration. "For everything. You should rest," Claire suggested, recognizing the fatigue beneath his composed exterior. "Today has been significant." "Life-altering," Christopher agreed. "In the best possible way." Claire moved toward the door, then paused. "Would you like to have dinner tomorrow evening? At the main house. Nothing formal, just a chance to continue our conversation." "I'd like that very much," Christopher replied, pleasure evident in his voice. With a final smile, Claire left him to settle into this first evening of freedom, walking the short path to her own home with measured steps. Inside, she moved through familiar rooms, aware of Christopher's presence on her property. Not intrusive, but significant. like a new constellation appearing in a familiar sky. She prepared a simple dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and settled at her dining table overlooking the garden that separated the main house from the guest cottage. Through lighted windows, she could see Christopher's silhouette moving about the space, beginning the process of reorienting to liberty, to privacy, to the mundane autonomy most people took for granted. Her phone chimed with a text message from Eleanor. "How did it go today?" Claire considered how to encapsulate the complex emotional landscape of the day. Finally, she replied, "Better than expected. Hopeful, but measured. One day at a time." Eleanor's response came quickly. Wisdom in that approach. "Call tomorrow if you need to process." Setting aside her phone, Claire sipped her wine, reflecting on the day's events and the uncertain path ahead. The future remained unwritten, containing neither guarantees nor predetermined outcomes. Yet within that uncertainty lay something precious, the freedom to choose to build connections based on authentic understanding rather than idealized projections or reactive defenses. Over the following weeks, Claire and Christopher established a careful rhythm of connection. Shared meals several times weekly, walks along Venice Beach at sunset, occasional attendance at foundation events where Christopher observed from the periphery, gradually absorbing the scope of Claire's work. They rediscovered each other in measured stages, not rushing toward predefined outcomes, but allowing natural evolution of understanding and trust. Christopher respected boundaries with scrupulous attention, never presuming intimacy beyond what Claire explicitly invited, never pressuring for definitions or commitments. 2 months after his release, Christopher began formal consultation with the Carter Justice Project, developing educational programs for financial industry professionals focused on ethical decision-making and recognition of slippery slopes. His presentations incorporated stark honesty about his own moral compromises, the incremental nature of corruption, and the devastating consequences for victims. "The most compelling ethics instructor I've ever encountered," one banking executive commented after a foundation workshop. "Hearing from someone who actually lived these failures and paid the price carries weight that academic ethics professors simply can't match." Christopher's work expanded gradually, his reputation for authenticity and insight growing within specialized circles. Though his criminal record permanently closed certain professional avenues, new opportunities emerged that leveraged his unique perspective, consulting on fraud prevention, speaking to business students about ethical boundaries, contributing to corporate compliance programs. Claire watched this evolution with quiet pride, noting the dignity with which Christopher accepted his permanently altered status. The man who had once defined himself through acquisition and achievement now found purpose in service and prevention, a transformation more meaningful than any wealth they had previously accumulated. Their personal relationship evolved with similar care, friendship deepening, trust rebuilding through consistent actions rather than dramatic declarations. They discovered shared interests beyond their previous focus on career and status: art exhibitions at small galleries, jazz performances at intimate venues, philosophical discussions sparked by books they both read. 6 months after Christopher's release, they attended a fundraising gala for the foundation together, his first public appearance as Claire's companion rather than consulting colleague. The evening brought encounters with people from their previous life, some awkward, others surprisingly warm. "I admire what you've built from the ashes," Jessica Winters told Claire during a quiet moment, her Seattle life evidently successful based on her confident demeanor and elegant attire. "And I'm glad to see you both finding a way forward." Christopher, standing nearby, nodded in acknowledgement of their complicated history. "Your warning to Claire years ago was the first crack in the facade. Thank you for having the courage to speak truth when it mattered." As they drove home from the event, Claire sensed Christopher's contemplative mood. "Difficult evening?" she asked. "Facing so many people from the past?" "Educational," he replied. "Seeing varied reactions, judgment from some, unexpected grace from others, a vivid reminder that we don't control others' perceptions, only our own actions moving forward." Claire reached across the console to squeeze his hand briefly, one of the small physical connections they had gradually reintroduced into their relationship. "You handled it with dignity." "I've had extensive practice accepting accountability," Christopher said with a rueful smile. 5 years' worth. At the house they lingered on the porch, reluctant to end the evening despite its emotional complexities. The spring air carried scents of jasmine and sea salt, neighborhood sounds muted by the late hour. "Would you like to come in for a nightcap?" Claire offered, a simple invitation that nonetheless represented another small boundary shifting. Inside, they settled in the living room with glasses of cognac, conversation flowing easily after the shared experience of the gala. Christopher related amusing observations about guests they'd encountered. Claire shared foundation developments, too preliminary for public announcement. A comfortable silence eventually settled between them, the kind that requires no filling, that speaks to deeper connection than constant conversation. "I've been thinking about us," Claire said finally, setting aside her glass, "about where we are, where we might be going." Christopher's expression registered careful interest, neither pushing nor withdrawing. "I'm listening. When you were first released, I deliberately avoided defining expectations or timelines," Claire continued. "We needed space to rediscover each other without pressure. But 6 months have passed and I find myself wanting more clarity about our path forward." "What kind of clarity would help you?" Christopher asked, his tone gentle. Claire considered the question thoughtfully. "I suppose I'm wondering if what we're rebuilding is a deep friendship with shared purpose, or something that might eventually include romantic partnership again." Christopher set his glass beside hers, turning more fully to face her. "What do you want it to be, Claire?" "That's just it," she said with a small, self-deprecating laugh. "I'm not entirely sure. There are moments when I feel drawn toward romantic reconnection, when the person you've become resonates so deeply with who I am now. Then there are moments when the past casts long shadows, when I wonder if too much has happened for that kind of trust to fully rebuild." Christopher nodded, understanding evident in his expression. "I've had similar thoughts, similar uncertainties." He paused, choosing words with care. "What I know with absolute certainty is that I treasure what we have now. This honest friendship, this shared purpose, these conversations that feel more authentic than anything in our previous life together." "Yes," Claire agreed. "That's precisely what I value too." "Perhaps," Christopher suggested, "we don't need to categorize our relationship definitively. Perhaps we can simply continue this journey of rediscovery, remaining open to wherever it leads naturally, whether that's dedicated friendship or eventual romantic reconnection." Claire considered this approach, appreciating its lack of pressure or artificial timelines. "That feels right," she said finally. "Though there is one thing I'd like to clarify." "What's that?" "If we do move toward romantic partnership again," Claire said deliberately, "it wouldn't be a continuation of our previous marriage. That relationship ended through betrayal, through cancer, through criminal consequences. What we would be building would be something entirely new, informed by our history, but not defined by it." Christopher absorbed this distinction, its significance registering in his thoughtful expression. "A new beginning rather than a restoration," he clarified. "I understand and agree completely." "Would you consider moving into the main house?" Claire asked, the question emerging organically from their discussion. "Not immediately, but perhaps in the coming weeks. The cottage has served its purpose in providing appropriate space, but if we're continuing this journey together..." Surprise and pleasure illuminated Christopher's features. "I'd like that very much," he said simply. "Whenever you feel the timing is right." 2 weeks later, Christopher relocated to the main house occupying the guest bedroom that gradually accumulated personal touches, reflecting his evolving identity. Books on ethics and philosophy, a small Buddha statue gifted by a fellow inmate who had taught him meditation, photographs from foundation events where his contributions had made meaningful difference. Their daily rhythms merged with surprising ease: morning coffee shared on the patio, workdays spent in their respective professional spheres, evenings of conversation and shared interests. Physical intimacy evolved cautiously, beginning with casual touches and gradually progressing to a first tentative kiss 4 months after Christopher moved into the main house. "We don't need to rush anything," he assured Claire afterward, sensitive to the complex emotions such reconnection might trigger. "I know," she replied with a smile that contained both certainty and anticipation. "We have time now. Real time, not borrowed against illness or imprisonment." A year and a half after Christopher's release, 2 years after Claire's cancer entered full remission, they traveled to Big Bear Lake for a weekend retreat. The location was deliberately chosen for its significance. The site of Michael's betrayal exposed Christopher's sacrifice, the beginning of their journey toward this new relationship. They hiked mountain trails that had once witnessed violence and revelation, now transformed by their shared experience of growth and healing. At a vista overlooking the lake, Christopher turned to Claire, taking both her hands in his. "I've been thinking about what you said months ago, that whatever we build together now isn't a continuation of our previous marriage, but something entirely new." Claire nodded, remembering the conversation clearly. "In that spirit," Christopher continued, "I wanted to offer you this, not as a proposal with expectations, but as a symbol of possibility." He opened his palm to reveal a simple band of twisted silver and gold, nothing like the ostentatious diamond he had given her in their previous life. "This represents who we are now," he explained. "Different metals, intertwined through pressure and transformation, creating something new and stronger than either element alone." Claire took the ring, examining its handcrafted simplicity, its organic beauty so unlike the status symbols they had once valued. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "and meaningful in all the right ways. You can wear it however feels right to you," Christopher clarified. "As a promise of continuing journey, not necessarily as an engagement. I just wanted you to have a tangible symbol of what we've built from broken pieces." Claire slipped the ring onto her right hand, not her traditional wedding finger, but close to her heart nonetheless. "Perfect," she said, leaning forward to kiss him with quiet certainty. "Absolutely perfect." That evening, seated before a fire in their rented cabin, conversation turned to the future, not with anxiety or pressure, but with peaceful contemplation of possibilities. "I've been offered a position with the National Ethics in Business Council," Christopher shared, "developing corporate integrity programs based on our foundation work. It would mean some travel, but a platform to influence systemic change." "You should accept," Claire encouraged immediately. "Your perspective is uniquely valuable, precisely because of your journey." Christopher nodded, grateful for her support. "And the foundation? Any new directions you're considering?" "Actually, yes," Claire replied, excitement coloring her voice. "We've been approached by the Justice Department about developing a national model for victim remediation in financial fraud cases. They're impressed with our holistic approach, practical support combined with emotional recovery resources." "That's extraordinary recognition," Christopher observed, pride evident in his expression. "Well deserved for the work you've built." "We've built," Claire corrected gently. "Your contributions over the past 2 years have been instrumental in our evolution." Christopher acknowledged this inclusion with humble gratitude, still sometimes surprised by the redemptive path that had emerged from his greatest failures. "Do you ever wonder about Michael?" he asked, the question emerging naturally from their discussion of the Foundation's origins. "Where he might be now, who he might have become in witness protection?" Claire considered this thoughtfully. "Occasionally. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant curiosity. His betrayal catalyzed everything that followed, both the destruction and the rebuilding. In some strange way," Christopher reflected, "we owe our current lives to his deception. Without that catalyst, we might have continued in our compromised existence indefinitely, me entangled with Santoro's organization, you unaware of the corruption beneath our perfect surface, both of us valuing appearance over substance." "A painful gift," Claire acknowledged. "Though I wouldn't recommend his method of delivery." Christopher laughed softly at her dry humor, another aspect of Claire that had emerged more fully in their reconstructed relationship. "No, indeed. Though I've learned not to question the messengers of necessary truth, however flawed their motivations." They fell silent, watching flames dance in the fireplace, each contemplating the complex journey that had brought them to this moment of peaceful connection. "I never imagined this outcome," Claire admitted after several minutes. "During those darkest days, the cancer diagnosis, discovering your affair, unraveling the financial deceptions, I couldn't envision any future that wasn't defined by loss and betrayal." "Nor could I," Christopher agreed. "In prison, especially early on, I saw only what had been destroyed, not what might eventually be rebuilt." "Yet here we are," Claire said softly, gesturing to encompass their present reality. "Not perfect, not unmarked by painful history, but authentic and meaningful in ways their previous life had never achieved." "Here we are," Christopher echoed, gratitude evident in his voice. "Through fire and flood to borrowed words from older wisdom traditions." Claire leaned against him, comfortable in this physical closeness that had been re-established with careful attention to consent and readiness. "I'm glad we found our way here, however circuitous the path." "As am I," Christopher replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. Profoundly, continuously glad. 3 years after Christopher's release from prison, they held a small ceremony in the garden of their Venice Beach home, not a wedding in traditional terms, but a commitment ritual that honored their unique journey. A dozen close friends witnessed their exchange of simple vows focused on honesty, growth, and mutual support through whatever challenges might lie ahead. Eleanor, now using a cane but still sharp as ever, raised the first toast. "To Claire and Christopher, who have taught us all that destruction can be the beginning of something more authentic, more valuable than what came before. May your next chapter be written with the wisdom so painfully earned in previous ones." Later that evening, as guests departed and twilight settled over the property, Claire and Christopher walked to the shoreline just beyond their garden gate. Waves washed rhythmically against the sand, the eternal cycle of advance and retreat, of claimed and surrendered territory. "Full circle in some ways," Christopher observed, his arm around Claire's waist, though spiral might be more accurate, covering similar ground but at a different level. "Higher ground," Claire agreed, leaning into his embrace. "With clearer vision." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the horizon, stars emerging in the darkening sky above. Their path forward remained uncharted in specifics. Health challenges might return, professional endeavors might evolve, new tests of character undoubtedly awaited. Yet the foundation beneath them felt solid in ways their previous life, for all its material success, never had. "What are you thinking?" Christopher asked, noting Claire's contemplative expression. She considered the question, wanting to offer genuine response rather than casual reassurance. "I'm thinking about the strange alchemy of our lives," she finally said. "How the worst betrayals and darkest diagnoses somehow transformed into this moment of authentic connection." Christopher nodded, understanding perfectly. Not despite those challenges, but because of them. They burned away everything inessential, leaving only what matters most. "Exactly," Claire agreed, turning to face him fully, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "I wouldn't wish our path on anyone, but I treasure where it's brought us." "As do I," Christopher said softly, drawing her closer, "more than I have words to express." Above them, a shooting star traced a brilliant arc across the night sky, brief, luminous, beautiful in its transience. They watched its passage in shared appreciation, no need to voice the obvious metaphor it presented about the preciousness of time, the value of moments fully inhabited. "Shall we go home?" Claire suggested, after several minutes of peaceful silence. "Yes," Christopher agreed, taking her hand as they turned toward the house that had become their shared sanctuary. "Let's go home." Together they walked up the beach toward warm windows, glowing against gathering darkness. Not the mansion on Bel Air's exclusive hillside where their previous life had imploded, but a more modest home filled with greater authenticity. Not the perfect couple they had once presented to the world, but complex individuals who had witnessed each other's worst failures and chosen connection nonetheless. The ring Christopher had given her caught the last light as they reached their garden gate. Twisted metals, transformed through pressure, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either element alone. A fitting symbol for the relationship they had forged from broken vows and shattered illusions. Not perfect, not unmarked by difficult history, but infinitely more valuable for having survived the crucible of its testing. As they crossed the threshold together, closing the door on one chapter and opening another, both understood that their journey was far from complete. The path ahead would contain its own challenges, its own tests of commitment and character. Yet they faced that uncertain future with something they had lacked in their previous life together: authentic knowledge of each other's capacity for both failure and redemption. In their home, now truly theirs in the deepest sense, photographs told the story of their reconstructed life. Claire accepting an award for the Foundation's work with fraud victims, Christopher speaking to business students about ethical decision-making. The two of them surrounded by children at a community center funded by the Carter Justice Project. Not the carefully curated images of perfection that had decorated their Bel Air mansion, but genuine moments of purpose and connection. Later that night, as they prepared for bed with the comfortable rhythms of a couple who had rediscovered intimacy through careful attention and respect, Claire found herself reflecting on the extraordinary path that had led them here. From the devastating betrayal that had shattered their marriage to the cancer diagnosis that had threatened her life. From Christopher's criminal entanglements to his sacrificial protection. From prison separation to tentative reconnection. Every painful step had somehow contributed to this peaceful present. "What are you smiling about?" Christopher asked, noticing her expression as he joined her beneath the covers. "Just thinking about unlikely journeys," she replied, settling against him with natural ease that had been re-earned through years of rebuilding trust. "How the worst moments of our lives somehow led to the most authentic." Christopher nodded, understanding immediately. Not the path anyone would choose, but perhaps the one we needed. He brushed a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "I wonder sometimes who we would have become without those crucible experiences." "Probably exactly who we were heading toward," Claire mused. "Successful but hollow. Admired but unknown, even to each other. A fate worse than prison," Christopher observed, not entirely joking. "At least incarceration forced me to confront who I truly was, without external markers of status or achievement." Claire considered this perspective, appreciating its hard-won wisdom. "And cancer stripped away my illusions about what matters, about how quickly everything we build can disappear." They lay together in comfortable silence, the sound of distant waves providing gentle accompaniment to their thoughts. Not the perfect couple they had once pretended to be, but something far more valuable. Flawed individuals who had seen the worst in each other and chosen connection nonetheless, who had rebuilt trust not through grand gestures but through consistent presence and transparent truth. "I love you," Christopher said finally, the simple declaration carrying the weight of their complex history. Not the infatuated love of their early years or the performance-based approval of their marriage's middle period, but something deeper, a love that had survived betrayal, separation, and the dismantling of everything they had once valued. "And I love you," Claire replied, the words equally weighted with conscious choice rather than romanticized obligation. The real you, not the perfect illusion, perhaps for the first time. As they drifted towards sleep in their shared bed, a communion that had been carefully and deliberately restored after years of separated existence, both recognized the precious fragility of what they had rebuilt. Not indestructible, not immune to future challenges, but authentic in ways their previous relationship had never achieved. The foundation they had established, both the literal philanthropic organization and the metaphorical basis of their reconstructed relationship, would continue evolving, adapting to new needs and circumstances. Their individual paths would intersect and occasionally diverge as professional commitments demanded, health considerations arose, and the natural progression of life unfolded. Yet something fundamental had shifted through their extraordinary journey, a central understanding that connection based on authentic knowledge of each other's deepest flaws and highest capacities created bonds far stronger than the perfect illusion they had once maintained. As moonlight filtered through Venetian blinds, painting silver stripes across their peaceful forms, Claire and Christopher Carter slept with the hard-earned tranquility of those who have survived destruction and discovered that what emerges from the ashes can be more precious than what came before, not despite the fire's devastation but because of it. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.